Hey now, we should be live. I'm looking a little dark here, and I'm going to address that in just a moment, but we should be live on both platforms. Let's see. We should be live. I'm live on YouTube, that's for sure. Okay, so I can have the chat up now, and I'm logged into the proper account this time. I was just looking very bright, and now I look so dark here. Hey, Offtree, how's it going today? Welcome in. Yeah, there's a few things I'm going to have to fix here. One is that this is just kind of a little... Oh, but then that screws up that side. Oh, I see what happened. I had raised the gain, and it reverted. I don't think I hit save. Hello, Adam. How are you? Welcome to today's stream. We're going to be reading and analyzing The Fellowship of the Ring. But first, I'm going to get my webcam fixed here. I'm too dark, and there's a mess like right around there that I'm going to get rid of. So let me go ahead and fix that. Okay. I did fix it right before stream, but you know what happened is I didn't hit save. So that's my fault. Alright, so we're just going to move this slider up. Like right around there. That looks right. There we go. There we go. No mystery fuzz there. Hey, Moogle, how's it going? Alright, let me just go ahead and just get the word out about the live stream here. More than I already have. And oh no, that's my mistake. Hold on, I have it in a text file. That was the description. We're just going to post on a few places. Oh, my category on Twitch says East 10 Nordics. I'll fix that. I was so concerned with the YouTube side of things that I didn't get that. But let me go ahead and just post that I'm live. So we're going to be reading and analyzing The Fellowship of the Ring today, which I've been looking forward to diving back into this. Hey, Alice, how's it going? Of course, Alice, also known as William Stone, on the YouTube side of things is my head of moderation on YouTube. Moogle, you're sort of the head of moderation on Twitch right now. And you guys are going to be keeping an eye on things. Not that we really have too many problems here. We always sort of have a good time. And this time I'm actually logged into the correct account on YouTube. So if I type something in the chat, it'll have the proper name. Okay, let me go ahead and do one more thing. Go. Oh, and I should text Laurel. She doesn't like to miss these. God, I hate Twitter. I'm trying to post on Twitter and trying to just look at it even. It's like going through the dead marshes. It's just difficult and stinky, and Gollum is there, you know. Yes, we treat his precious lands. Oh, Gollum. We're well prepared here, though. Okay, we're in business, guys. We're in business. So welcome in everybody to the stream. We're live on Twitch, we're live on YouTube, and today it is going to be The Fellowship of the Ring. Macaroni and cheese and collard greens. How very southern of you. What did I have for dinner today? Let's see. I had a really big and very thick pork chop. And these potato, they call them crowns. They're sort of like tater tots, but they're flatter. And some avocado with that. That was really good. It was a good dinner. Really massive pork chop, though, like at least 2 inches thick. I haven't seen them like that in a store since well, since I lived in New York City, really. So how can you pass on something like that? I wish I had gotten pictures of the tuna that I had the other day. I would have shown you that, Alice. Because it's funny, just a few days before that, you mentioned that you had tuna steak, seared tuna steak for dinner. You know. Yeah. Yeah. I've been really looking forward to this. Streaming on both Twitch and YouTube is really fun. And we get a really nice, busy chat, which is really cool. I know that Matt and Sid had a blast on the last time we did this. Of course, this is just going to be me today. But the good news is, for anybody who was present at the last stream, is that we hammered out one ongoing issue, which is, it doesn't come up on stream, but it was the reason that the last time that I streamed on YouTube, we started pretty late. And that was because Matt... well, he was running late, which is fine, but aside from that, he has issues logging on to Discord. And I this whole time, he's been using Discord through the website, which is really just not a great way of doing it. And he didn't have the app, and I've been telling him for months, really, you've got to go to the website and get the app. And he's like, what app? You know, like, I'm like, what are you talking about? What app? Just you go there and it's right there. Download the app. And he was just, I'm not seeing it, you know. So after last stream, Sid had to go because he was, you know, he has other things that he's got to attend to. But I stayed on with Matt, and he was able to share his screen with me. And we went to the Discord website on his computer, and his laptop is so old and that it's in a really low resolution. So, and this is really not so much his fault as it's the fault of whoever designed the Discord website. Hey, Zach, how's it going, man? Zach, would you do me a favor? Would you, after stream, would you send me a private message on Discord? I wanted to ask you something. If you could just do that for me sometime after stream, just hit me up and say, hey, you know, and I have a question to ask you. But anyway, so his computer was at a lower resolution, his display, and because of that, the buttons to download the app were actually hidden by a different element of the website. Whoever designed that website did not account for the fact that somebody like Matt might be on a computer that might have been provided to them by the military, and it has a pretty low output resolution, you know. So there we are. And hey, Chewy, how's it going? I saw your comment earlier. Thanks for that. Oh, speaking of comments, who was it that left me? Let me go to my YouTube dashboard here. Somebody had left me a comment on a very kind comment, I thought, on YouTube of the video that is, well, it's already up, but it's members only right now. There we are. Oh, that was Richard Phillips. He's a member of the channel. And he had said, my sympathy on the migraine. I've known a few people with that, and it sounds absolutely horrible. I've had a really bad migraine this whole week. It's just starting to clear up today. But yesterday when I was editing the video, I noticed, like, oh God, I look terrible. You know, I can see the pain in my eyes, and I was like, oh my God, people are going to notice that I was really like I mentioned at the beginning of the video that I had a migraine and I was trying to get through it, and sort of in not a hasty manner, like Treebeard would say, but an expeditious manner. And I just looked at it and I was like, wow, you could really see that I was hurting. Like, damn, I look awful. And today, and this is even with glasses on, and today you could see my eyes are much clearer. So yeah. I was editing the video. That was filmed Tuesday night. Well, Tuesday night / Wednesday morning. because it was well after 1 a.m. when I finished filming that video. That was episode 101 of my Q&A series, where where members can see it already. It'll go up live for everybody that's not a member next Wednesday, which the thumbnail question on that is, why did Galadriel give Gimli 3 of her hairs and not any hair to Feanor when he was so great and he was a king and all this, and Gimli's just, a dwarf? That was one of my favorite questions to answer recently, because I got to discover a little tick in the Fellowship of the Ring, which we'll talk about when we get to that section, Lothlorien, and also in Unfinished Tales, which is where they talk about Galadriel and Feanor. When I mentioned that Feanor asked for her hair, there's sort of 2 misconceptions about that comes up. The first of which is that it was in the Silmarillion. It's not in the Silmarillion. It's in a section of Unfinished Tales called The History of Galadriel and Celeborn. And the second in this, I hear this repeated all the time in the Tolkien community, is that Feanor asked for 3 hairs, and while Gimli asked for 1 and got 3. And the idea of this is because Tolkien says in this passage that I forgot to text Laurel. Let me do that real quick, and I'll talk about that. She'll be angry with me if I don't let her know that we're live here. I just said that I was going to do that, and then I got all caught up in this Galadriel Feanor thing. Where is Laurel? Oh, there she is. No, that's not Laurel. Oh, here she is. She keeps changing her icon. Okay. There we go. Okay, I feel better about it now. I didn't want to upset her. You just finished Unfinished Tales. Amazing. Cool. What was your favorite bit in that? My favorite was actually one of the first bits, which was on Turin is coming to Gondolin. Although the Astari and Palantir sections were really fascinating to me when I was young and I was first reading it. As I first read it, I was a teenager. But anyway, it's commonly said that... I think that noise was Laurel messaging me. Okay, yeah. It's commonly said that Feanor asked for Galadriel's hair that he asked for 3 hairs, and she of course told him no, and then Gimli asks for 1 hair, and she gives him 3. Turin Gondolin. Yeah, I mean, it's just such a... Can you imagine if he had finished that? If he had written the entire Fall of Gondolin in that amazing style? It would have been his best book. Even better than The Children of Húrin, better than The Lord of the Rings. Sadly, we didn't get that. But can you imagine that part with the harp at Lameth? Amazing. When Ulmo comes out of the ocean, like every part of it going through the 7 gates gives me chills. Seeing Turin as they're going past. Anyway, it's a misconception. What happened, Feanor didn't ask her for 3 hairs. Feanor asked her for a tress, which is like this. It's a lot more than 3 hairs, you know? Yeah, it would have been incredible. Exactly. And I actually wrote a big thesis on Tur called "On Turin is Coming to Gondolin," which was very inspired by reading that story. And you can see Alice there. That's their favorite part of Unfinished Tales as well. I think most people like either that or The Mariner's Wife, which unfortunately really just cuts off at a kind of a right when it's starting to get really good. But anyway. Feanor asked for a tress of hair, and the number 3 comes into it for 2 reasons. One is that he asked her 3 times, or begged, as said in Unfinished Tales. And the other is that because her hair was golden, but in certain light, kind of shown in a sort of a silvery way, it looked like the two trees blended together, and it was the idea of the Silmarils early on. And of course, he wound up making 3 of those. So that's where I think people get that idea. And Gimli didn't ask for one hair. He didn't ask at all. She commanded him to speak his desires, and he said a single strand of her hair would be his desire, but he doesn't expect to get it. And then, of course, he gets 3 hairs. And I talk about that in the upcoming video, or if you're a member, you would have already seen it, or could have already seen it, episode 101. But that's one of my favorite questions that we've gotten kind of recently. A lot of good questions have come through recently. My favorite Tolkien character. Now, this is interesting, Adam. I'm glad you asked this, because I think I saw a meme not too far ago. There goes my brain. Not too long ago, that sort of explained how, and this was just for The Lord of the Rings, but if you're really young and you're reading it, you're sort of like attracted to Gimli as a character, and then as a teenager it might actually be Sauron, and then as a young adult it's Aragorn, and then as an adult you might settle on either Sam or Gandalf. And I think Gandalf is actually my favorite character. The deep dive of like what he's all about and his whole personality that I've done really solidified that. And I would say that Gimli would have no idea who Feanor even is, because to him you have to remember, this is 6,000 years ago, 6,000 about 500 years ago, and I have this bit of Chewie. I have this bit of what they call fanon, which is fan canon, an idea in your head that isn't in the books, but it fits in with what's in the books. And I believe that sometime in the Fourth Age, Gimli was very busy in the Fourth Age. I think that sometime in the Fourth Age, he would have sat down and read Bilbo's book, the translations from Elvish lore, which would include what we know is the Silmarillion and a lot of the unfinished tales as well. And how often is Galadriel getting requests for hair? Well, actually, I do talk about that in the video, because the big connection is that she mentions that she's never received a request so courteous and so bold yet so courteous. But we know that Feanor asked her, which tells me that he wasn't courteous when he asked. So I would often, and what's interesting, and here's another little connection, is that when she gives Legolas a bow, and it's mentioned that the string of the bow is elf hair, it could be hers, it could be her husband's, it could be Haldir's, it could be anybody's. That's sort of another interesting little thing that we could talk about. But I have this fanon in my head that sometime he read the translations from Elvish lore that were written by many, many elves and translated by Bilbo and put into the Red Book of Westmarch by Sam. And he read that part about Feanor and the hair, and he got really riled up about it, because I think then he would understand what the gift meant. Because he already knew what the gift meant to him. He said it right there in that scene, that it was an heirloom of his house and a testament to the renewed friendship of the dwarves and the elves. But also, he now would understand what it meant to her to give him those 3 hairs. So I think that at that point, Gimli would have he would have a manly cry, he would shed some tears, and then he would want to sail to the west. And because at some point he says to Legolas that his last wish before he dies is to see Galadriel again. And I think it really was to thank her again. And Legolas was just like, hey, man, let's go. And Legolas made a boat, and they sailed off from Pelargir. And I just realized, Moogle, you told me that my category on Twitch was incorrect, and I still haven't fixed that. So let me get cracking on that real quick. Where's my Twitch dashboard? It should be over here somewhere. Give me one moment, guys. It says I'm playing East 10, and that's not accurate. Let me change the category to talk shows, podcasts. Okay, that's all fixed. Rohan reminds you of an area in Dragon Quest II called Rhone. Oh, that's good. Yeah, that's a good one, Moogle. I'll tell you what is interesting about that is the first time that I got to Rhone, which in some translations is called Randorak, I got the feeling like because you go through that tunnel and then you come out and it's snowy, so it's not a direct analog, but I got the feeling of like I'm in Mordor. I just got through Cirith Ungol and I've arrived in Mordor. Zach, I could ask you to just tone down the language, but anyway, YouTube doesn't have categories, but it does let you put the full description, so I have all the hashtags and everything in there. But if you look, I don't know, Zach, are you on Quora? Because when I posted that answer on Quora, the image I used was a meme of, Gimli and Galadriel and hey WT and then as Gimli is running off happily with the hare, you see Feanor's spirit poking out of the corner like this, and he says something rather rude to her, and she makes a gesture to him that is considered rude, and tells him to to do something that's not necessarily possible. But anyway, we're gonna get started, guys. And thank you, WT, for congrats on video 100. Yes, I was actually just talking about video 101, episode 101, which is available for members right now. Are you talking about the Return to Moria, which is the new game, Richard? I have not, and the reason is because even though I love, Tolkien and the Lord of the Rings, and I love video games, that particular style of video game isn't really my thing. I'm sort of waiting for the Shire game to come out, because that might be more my speed. Although really what I would like is a real meaty role-playing game, like something akin to maybe like the first Dragon Age Origins, something like that, but in Middle Earth. It doesn't have to be the Lord of the Rings, but it could be an original story, maybe something set in the Third Age about Rohan or Gondor or something like that. That would be really cool. Anyway, let's go over here. And welcome here to the Fellowship of the Ring. And we're going to recap briefly. We're actually on Book 2, which is the second half of the Fellowship of the Ring, being the first part of the Lord of the Rings. Frodo has gone through many trials, and he has arrived at his destination of Rivendell, also called Imladris. And here in Rivendell, Imladris, he has been a part of a great council. We only got through one chapter last time, because the Council of Elrond is quite meaty, and there's so much to stop and talk about, because it's not just all of the members of the Fellowship, which are not even all present, because Merry and Pippin are not here. Sam sort of snuck in. But also you have Galdor and Erestor and Glorfindel, and they talk about Saruman, and they talk about Radagast, and they talk about Tom Bombadil, so it's just sort of, yeah. But yeah, I think that, the Moria game, I think that's, it might not be the sort of thing that I'm going to do. I think at some point we got to do some video game live streaming here on YouTube, as well as on Twitch. Maybe we can do the Shadow of Mordor, or maybe some of the movie games or the Lego games. I have a lot of these games, and it would be fun to go into them, not just from the hey, I'm a gamer and I like Lord of the Rings, but from the Tolkien scholar perspective. I still have to finish my playthrough of The Hobbit, though. I kind of got distracted by so many other things and very, very busy. And hey there, Rico. Okay, so the next chapter, which is chapter 3 of book 2, and I just want to talk about the title here. It's The Ring Goes South. Now, The Lord of the Rings, a lot of people think of it as 3 books. It's The Fellowship of the Ring and The Two Towers and The Return of the King. It's 3 books. But Tolkien didn't see it that way. He never saw it that way. He saw it either as a single book called The Lord of the Rings or as 6 books, which is why there are 6 parts to it. And he wanted it all published as one big volume. Well, actually, he wanted it published as 2 big volumes, one being The Lord of the Rings and the other being The Silmarillion. And, yep, one was 6. Yes, that's true, WT. You got that right. And they told him they weren't, his publisher told him they weren't super interested in the Silmarillion, and he sent them a letter about all of that, and he was came off as very depressed in this letter. One day we'll read his letters for sure. We'll go through all of those. But anyway, well, Richard, what's special about the Shire game is that it's being made by unless you're talking about Moria, but what's special about the Shire, it's being made by Weta Workshop. So that I think that means that it's going to have a lot of care put into it. But he was told that they were not going to publish The Lord of the Rings as a single volume. Now it's the 50s, it's the early 50s, but even though it's we're going into 1954 or 1955 around this time period, it's still very post World War II. Paper shortages are still a thing, and the publisher tells them, we're not going to publish a 1,200-page book, but we'll break it up. And Moria, yeah, I don't know, it looks cool, but it just I don't think that I would enjoy the actual gameplay loop. I would enjoy the whole aspect of exploring Moria probably more than actually playing it. But anyway, especially that it's the 4th Age, I think that's pretty interesting. But so he was told it would be broken up, and he thought, well, we'll do it as 6 volumes. And he actually had titles for all of the 6 volumes, and the publisher said, well, we'll do 3, and he says, okay. But he had titles, and none of them were used. He didn't come up with The Fellowship of the Ring. He didn't come up with The Two Towers. He didn't even like that title, The Two Towers. He didn't come up with The Return of the King. He didn't like that title either. He thought it was a spoiler. But anyway, what's interesting is that he had a lot of different titles for each section, and one of them was called The Ring Goes South. And that was supposed to be the title of Book 2, The Ring Goes South. So it was used as a chapter title instead. And by the way, some of the titles did get used elsewhere. Book 3, he wanted to call The Treason of Isengard, which wound up becoming one of the titles of the History of Middle-earth volumes, Yeah, well, yeah, and the thing is about, War and Peace, though, is it was already considered a classic, whereas this is a publisher dealing with this guy who's... They're like, hey, man, it's taken you 20 years to write The Hobbit Part 2, and why is it 1,200 pages long? All right, so let's start off here. Chapter 3, The Ring Goes South. Later that day, the hobbits held a meeting of their own in Bilbo's room. Merry and Pippin were indignant when they heard that Sam had crept into the council and had been chosen as Frodo's companion. "It's most unfair," said Pippin. "Instead of throwing him out and clapping him in chains, Elrond goes and rewards him for his cheek." "Rewards," said Frodo. "I can't imagine a more severe punishment. You are not thinking of what you are saying. Condemned to go on this hopeless journey, a reward? Yesterday I dreamed that my task was done, and I could rest here a long while, perhaps for good." "I don't wonder," said Merry, "and I wish you could. But we are envying Sam, not you. If you have to go, then it will be a punishment for any of us to be left behind, even in Rivendell. We have come a long way with you, and have been through some stiff times. We want to go on. So let me pause here for just a brief moment, not to analyze anything this time, but just to say, what great friends, right? I mean, Frodo is going to be going into the closest thing to hell on earth. As a matter of fact, the sections of Mordor that he's going through, one of them is the plain of Gorgoroth, but another is called Udun, which is literally the Elvish word that means hell. And they're jealous of Sam that he gets to go with them because and Frodo's saying, "Hey man, that's not such a great thing. I'm traveling to hell, basically, the worst place that there is in the world. And you want to come with?" And they're like, "Yeah, man, you're our bro, I mean, what great friends." "That's what I meant," said Pippin. "We hobbits ought to stick together, and we will. I shall go unless they chain me up. There must be someone with intelligence in the party." "Then you will certainly not be chosen, Peregrine Took," said Gandalf, looking in through the window, which was near the ground. "But you are all worrying yourselves unnecessarily. Nothing is decided yet." "Nothing decided," said Pippin. "Then what are you all doing? You were shut up for hours." "Talking," said Bilbo. "There was a deal of talk, and everyone had an eye-opener, even old Gandalf. I think Legolas's bit of news about Gollum caught even him on the hop, though he passed it off." "You were wrong," said Gandalf. "You were inattentive. I had already heard of it from Gway here. If you want to know, the only real eye-openers, as you put it, were you and Frodo, and I was the only one that was not surprised." "Well, anyway," said Bilbo, "nothing was decided beyond choosing poor Frodo and Sam. I'm afraid all the time that it might come to this if I was let off. But if you ask me, Elrond will send a fair number when the reports come in. Have they started yet, Gandalf?" "Yes," said the wizard. "Some of the scouts have been sent out already. More will go tomorrow. Elrond is sending elves, and they will get in touch with the rangers, and maybe with Thranduil's folk in Mirkwood. And Aragorn has gone with Elrond's sons. We shall have to scour the lands all round for many long leagues before any move is made. So cheer up, Frodo. You'll probably make quite a long stay here." "Ah," said Sam gloomily. "We'll just wait long enough for winter to come." "That can't be helped," said Bilbo. "It's your fault partly, Frodo, my lad, insisting on waiting for my birthday. A funny way of honouring it, I can't help thinking. Not the day I would have chosen for letting the SBs into Bag End. But there it is. You can't wait now till spring, and you can't go till the reports come back. When winter first begins to bite, and stones crack in the frosty night, when pools are black and trees are bare, 'til ease evil in the wild to fare. But I'm afraid will be just your luck." "I'm afraid it will," said Gandalf. "We can't start till we have found out about the riders." So I'm going to pause here and just mention that it's very much an extremely Bilbo thing to always have a poem or a song ready at hand for any situation. And of course, he mentions the SBs, referring to the Sackville Bagginses. And it's interesting that Bilbo's sort of like, "Oh, you gave them my house. That's great, Hey, I left that to you, and on my birthday, I'm just going to catch up a little bit here on chat here. You'd play a Shire game in which you level up by eating mushrooms and smoking a bit of the old Toby. I think what you want is Super Mario Brothers. What's interesting is that I'm in some ways I'm pretty hobbitish, but in one important way, and I made reference to this on Quora a few times recently and on YouTube as well, that I hate mushrooms. I can't eat them. There's something about the texture and the smell that gets to me. I can't do it. And I've tried a few times, but no. Was Merry the closest friend to Frodo out of all the hobbits? I think starting out, yes, because Sam is very much his employee, his confidant, surely, but Merry is sort of like the guy who up until this point has been in charge, and he was the one that was hanging around Frodo and sort of acting as his bouncer in the first chapter there, But yeah, That's, what C.W. Train there said is correct. Everybody wants to have a friend like Sam, and everybody deserves to have a friend like Sam. But maybe we could be Sam for other people. I think by the end of it, they're all excellent friends. Merry was definitely closer to Frodo than the others, but by the end of it, after what he went through with Sam, certainly Sam was closest to him. But here's the way that I would put it. I would say that still, at the end, Merry is Frodo's best friend, and Sam is more like a brother to him. They're definitely kin, not by blood certainly, but they both were raised by Bilbo, at least partially, and they went to hell and back together. So I would say that they're more like brothers than friends. Okay, let's continue. I thought they were all destroyed in the flood, said Merry. You cannot destroy ring-wraiths like that, said Gandalf. The power of their master is in them, and they stand or fall by him. We hope that they were all unhorsed and unmasked, and so made for a while less dangerous. But we must find out for certain. In the meantime, you should try to forget about your troubles, Frodo. I do not know if I can do anything to help you, but I will whisper this in your ears. Someone said that intelligence would be needed in the party. He was right. I think I shall come with you. Oh, and I want to point out here, this is really interesting here. It's just an observation, is that they're all having their little Hobbit meeting, and Gandalf is peeking in through the window. It's sort of a callback to, the Shadows of the Past, which is, by the way, was the first chapter of the book that Tolkien wrote. And he, where Frodo and Gandalf are having this very important meeting of minds, and Sam is dropping those eaves. He's at the window listening. Now, and Gandalf tells him off for it, but now Gandalf is... Well, he's not doing it secretly, at least, although he was at least listening for a while before he spoke up. So great was Frodo's delight at this announcement that Gandalf left the windowsill where he had been sitting and took off his hat and bowed. I only said I think I shall come. Do not count on anything yet. In this matter, Elrond will have much to say, and your friend the Strider. Which reminds me, I want to see Elrond. I must be off. How long do you think I shall have here? Said Frodo to Bilbo when Gandalf had gone. Oh, I don't know. I can't count days in Rivendell, said Bilbo. But quite long, I should think. We can have many good talk. What about helping me with my book and making a start on the next? Have you thought of an ending? Yes. Several, and all are dark and unpleasant, said Frodo. Oh, that won't do, said Bilbo. Books ought to have good endings. How would this do? And they all settled down together and lived together happily ever after. It will do well if it ever comes to that, said Frodo. Ah, said Sam, and where will they live? That's often what I wonder. Just a brief note on something that Bilbo said here that I think is often either missed or misconstrued. And yes, W2, his gardener. Bilbo mentions that he can't really count the days in Rivendell. Now, this is interesting because a lot of people will say, well, Bilbo is, at this point in time, 129 years old, I want to say. Somewhere around there. He might be 128 still, actually. I think he had just turned 128. And he's pretty old. And even though physically he would probably look around in his 60s or so, late 60s, he's feeling it in his mind. And he mentions this a few times, that he's feeling very old. He mentioned it when he was 111, that he was feeling every bit as old as 111, even though he was physically 50 at that point. And a lot of people think that him not being able to count the days in Rivendell is a sign of oncoming senility. And, by the end of the book, Bilbo is pretty senile. But that's not the case. What's actually going on here is that Bilbo, along with everybody else that's there, is under the protection of one of the rings of power. Vilya, the Ring of Air, as it is called, the one with the sapphire set into it. Elrond has it. Of course, you can't see it on his hand. It's invisible. It's hidden, just like Gandalf's ring is invisible. And and Galadriel's is invisible unless revealed to the ring bearer or revealed to one of the bearers of one of the rings of power. And this effect is more prominent, I think, in Lothlorien, and there's a part where Sam and Aragorn talk about it, and we'll talk about that more when we get to that section. But it makes places like Lothlorien or like Imladris, Rivendell, to be a little bit more like the Undying Lands. And in the Undying Lands, days go by real fast in your perception. Time doesn't actually change, but your perception of time changes. That's why when the men of Numenor said, can't we come live in the Undying Lands and be immortal just like you guys, the elves? And they said, well, it's not the land that makes us immortal. It's just the way God made us immortal. And God made you mortal, and he did this all for a reason. And Numenor's response is, well, can't we come visit or just live there even if we're... I said, but your lives will go by so quickly. And they don't mean... A lot of people misinterpret that to mean that, being around the holiness of the Valar or whatever is going to just like kind of drain you and make you die faster. No, it's that your life just seems to go by so quickly. Everything just blurs together and you can't really tell time anymore. And that's the way it is in the Undying Lands, because that's the way that the elves are, and that's the way that the Ainur are. Okay, let me... They're invisible because you have to remember that they don't really trust anyone with the information that they have these rings of power, because if the more people that know who actually has the 3 rings, the more likely it is that Sauron is going to find out. And Sauron has no idea who has that. They even composed a poem that starts with 3 rings for the elven kings under the skies. Elrond, Galadriel, and Gandalf. None of these guys are elven kings. We have an elven lord, an elven lady, and a wizard. And yes, Gil-galad was a king, but, he gave his ring to Elrond. Círdan wasn't a king. He was a lord. So the more people know about them, and you will see this, like I said, once again, there's a conversation actually between Frodo and Aragorn about why it's such a secret, because Frodo blurts it out that Galadriel has one of these rings, and Aragorn tells him, you should not have said that, even to me. Because the more people know about it, the more likely it is that it's going to get back to Sauron. The Sackville Bagginses were Tolkien's critique of upper middle class snobs. He obviously admired genuine, unsophisticated people, not pompous, status-oriented types. Saruman's another example. I think Saruman is completely different. But I agree with you that while, not an allegory, obviously, we have to hashtag not an allegory, right? It is obvious that we see the thoughts of the author in a lot. Saruman is more his commentary on science and technology, and I just wrote something about this, and I think it's in episode 101 of my series, that Tolkien has this similar but converse opinion to Arthur C. Clarke. And Arthur C. Clarke wrote that a sufficiently advanced technology it is so advanced that we can't understand it would be magic to us. So what we see as magic might be incredibly advanced technology. And Tolkien had the opinion that technology was actually magic being misused. And we see that with one of the comments that in the previous chapter that Gandalf had made to Saruman, that somebody who destroys something to understand how it works has left the path of wisdom. Does that mean that Morgoth's multi-thousand-year imprisonment didn't feel like thousands of years to him? Oh, that's a good one. It's very interesting to sort of get into what does Morgoth think? What does Morgoth feel? What is his perception? And obviously we can't know. But I would say that it probably felt like a long time, just like it will feel like a very long time for Feanor, because they're stewing in their feelings. And they're just thinking on everything. Bilbo's not spending a whole lot of time thinking. He's writing poems, and he's eating, and he's smoking, and he's hanging out with the elves, and he's having a good time. He's in his retirement, He's not doing a lot of ruminating and stuff like that. So, yeah. You wonder if the power of the Elven Rings has a range. I believe that your second sentence is more closely that it can be focused or spread by the user's will, and that's why it's the borders of Rivendell and the borders of Lothlorien, which is bigger than Rivendell. Yeah, I would say that your second statement is correct. Okay, we got Celebrimbor should have been king. Well, you see, the thing about that is that you got to look at the succession. Feanor was not the king. A lot of people make that mistake because Feanor came to Middle-earth and he never established a kingdom. He just died. And then there was this thing where it was like, well, who becomes the king? Who establishes the kingdom? Is it going to be the eldest of Feanor's sons, or is it going to be Fingolfin? And because it wound up being Fingolfin, it's his lineage that becomes the king's, and that's how we get to Gil-galad. Yeah. Being stuck in a never-ending present doesn't sound nice. Richard, have you ever seen the television show The Good Place? I would recommend it. I don't want to spoil anything, but I would just say if you haven't seen that show, you should watch it. Because when I finished it, and Alice was there with me, and a great deal other of my friends were there, so we finished it together, and I thought about the Undying Lands and Tolkien quite a bit at the end there, Yeah. Feanor was never the king. The first High King in Middle-earth was Fingolfin. Okay, let's continue. For a while, the hobbits continued to talk and think of the past journey and of the perils that lay ahead, but such was the virtue of the land of Rivendell that soon all fear and anxiety was lifted from their minds. Once again, the ring. The future, good or ill, was not forgotten, but ceased to have any power over the present. Health and hope grew strong in them, and they were content with each good day as it came, taking pleasure in every meal and in every word and song. So the days slipped away as each morning dawned bright and fair, and each evening followed cool and clear, but autumn was waning fast. Slowly the golden light faded to pale silver, and the lingering leaves fell from the naked trees. A wind began to blow chill from the misty mountains to the east. The hunter's moon waxed round in the night sky, and put to flight all the lesser stars. But low in the south one star shone red. Every night, as the moon waned again, it shone brighter and brighter. Frodo could see it from his window, deep in the heavens, burning like a watchful eye that glared above the trees on the brink of the valley. The hobbits have been nearly 2 months in the house of Elrond, and November had gone by with the last shreds of autumn, and December was passing when the scouts began to return. Some had gone north beyond the springs of the Horwell into the Etten moors, and others had gone west with the help of Aragorn and the rangers had searched the lands far down the Grey Flood, as far as Tharbad, where the old North River crossed where the old North Road crossed the river by a ruined town. Many had gone east and south, and some of these had crossed the mountains and entered Mirkwood, while others had climbed the pass at the source of the Gladden River, and had come down into Wyaldalan and over the Gladden fields, and so at length had reached the old home of Radagast at Rosgobel. Radagast was not there, and they had returned over the high pass that was called the Dimrill Stair. The sons of Elrond, Elladan and Elrohir, were the last to return. They had made a great journey, passing down the Silverlode in a strange country, but of their errand they would not speak to any save Elrond. In no region had the messengers discovered any signs or tidings of the riders or other servants of the enemy. Even from the eagles of the misty mountains they had learned no fresh news. Nothing had been seen or heard of Gollum, but the wild wolves were still gathering and were hunting again far up the great river. 3 of the black horses had been found, at once drowned in the flooded ford. On the rocks at the rapids below, its searchers discovered the bodies of 5 more, and also a long black cloak, slashed and tattered. Of the black riders no other trace was to be seen, and nowhere was their presence to be felt. It seemed that they had vanished from the north. 8 of the 9 are accounted for, at least, said Gandalf. It is rash to be too sure, yet I think we may hope now that the ring-wraiths were scattered, and have been obliged to return as best they could to their master in Mordor, empty and shapeless. If that is so, it will be some time before they can again begin the hunt. Of course, the enemy has other servants, but they will have to journey all the way up to the borders of Rivendell before they can pick up our trail, and if we are careful, that will be hard to find. But we must delay no longer. So, just to mention here that they found 8 horses, and what actually happened is the Witch King actually found 1 horse that survived, didn't get drowned by the flood, didn't get smashed up, and was alive, and he rode all the way back to Barad-dûr and told Sauron what happened. And Sauron actually powers him up quite a bit, gives him what Tolkien refers to as additional demonic force, which is an interesting converse to Glorfindel, who had gotten additional angelic powers from Manwë before he came to Middle-earth, making Glorfindel and the Witch King sort of 2 sides of a coin. And it's interesting that the prophecy of the Witch King's demise was laid down specifically by Glorfindel. We'll get to that more in the appendix when we get there. We're quite a ways off from that. Elrond summoned the hobbits to him. He looked gravely at Frodo. The time has come, he said. If the ring is to set out, it must go soon. But those who go with it must not count on their errand being aided by war or force. They must pass into the domain of the enemy far from aid. Do you still hold to your word, Frodo, that you will be the ring-bearer? I do, said Frodo. I will go with Sam. Then I cannot help you much, not even with counsel, said Elrond. I can foresee very little of your road, and how your task is to be achieved I do not know. The shadow has crept now to the feet of the mountains, and draws nigh even to the borders of the grey flood, and under the shadow all is dark to me. You will meet many foes, some open and some disguised, and you will find friends upon your way when you least look for it. I will send out messages such as I can contrive to those whom I know in the wide world. But so perilous are the lands now become that some may well miscarry, or come no quicker than to you yourself. And I will choose you companions to go with you, as far as they will or fortune allows. The number must be few, since your hope is in speed and secrecy. Had I a host of elves and armor of the elder days, it would avail little, save to arouse the powers of Mordor. The company of the ring shall be 9, and the 9 walkers shall be set against the 9 riders that are evil. With you and your faithful servant Gandalf will go, for this shall be his great task, and maybe the end of his labors. For the rest, they shall represent the other free peoples of the world, elves, dwarves, and men. Legolas shall be for the elves, and Gimli son of Gloin for the dwarves. They are willing to go at least to the passes of the mountains, and maybe beyond. For men, you shall have Aragorn son of Arathorn, for the ring of Isildur concerns him closely. Strider, cried Frodo. Yes, he said with a smile. I ask leave once again to be your companion, Frodo. I would have begged you to come, said Frodo, only I thought you were going to Minas Tirith with Boromir. I am, said Aragorn, and the sword that was broken shall be reforged ere I set out to war. But your road and our road lie together for many hundreds of miles. Therefore Boromir will also be in the company. He is a valiant man. There remains 2 more to be found, said Elrond. These I will consider. Of my household I may find some that it seems good for me to send. But that will leave no place for us, cried Pippin in dismay. We don't want to be left behind. We want to go with Frodo. That is because you do not understand, and cannot imagine what lies ahead, said Elrond. Neither does Frodo, said Gandalf, unexpectedly supporting Pippin. Nor do any of us see clearly. It is true that if these hobbits understood the danger, they would not dare to go. But they would still wish to go, or wish that they had dared, and be shamed and unhappy. I think, Elrond, that in this matter It would be well to trust rather to their friendship than to great wisdom. Even if you choose for us an elf lord, such as Glorfindel, he could not storm the Dark Tower, nor open the road to the fire by the power that is in him. You speak gravely, said Elrond, but I am in doubt. The Shire, I forebode, is not free now from peril. And these two I had thought to send back there as messengers, to do what they could, according to the fashion of their country, to warn the people of their danger. In any case, I judge that the younger of these two, Peregrine Took, should remain. My heart is against his going. Then, Master Elrond, you will have to lock me in prison, or send me home tied in a sack, said Pippin, for otherwise I shall follow the company. Let it be so, then. You shall go, said Elrond, and he sighed. Now the tale of the nine is filled. In 7 days the company must depart. So, to comment here, a lot of people talk about Merry and Pippin going, and that these are spots that could have been, say, Glorfindel, or perhaps Erestor or Galdor, or just some random elf that we've never heard of. And it is true that when Tolkien started writing about Glorfindel being in The Lord of the Rings, because he's a character from The Fall of Gondolin, that he intended him to go, but even though the story kind of pans out this way, Merry and Pippin are not replacing him. Legolas, actually, is. Legolas was a character that he introduced because he wanted more of a connection to the Hobbit and to Thranduil and everything, and he wanted to have an elf there in the party, obviously, because it had to be all of the Free Peoples, not just some of the Free Peoples. So he sort of makes reference to it with this bit that Elrond was going to send 2 other elves, and Merry and Pippin sort of, well, Pippin especially insists on going, and Gandalf says, well, you could send Glorfindel, but it wouldn't really amount to much, and you should trust to their friendship. And what's interesting here is that Gandalf mentions that, yeah, they might regret going because they're going to see horrible things, they might die, but if they don't go, they're going to be ashamed and they're going to wish they had gone, or at least, tried to go. And we see this crop up again specifically with Merry. We see it happen when Theoden, who is a good friend of Merry's, will become a good friend of Merry's, is going off to the Battle of Pelennor Fields, where we know he's going to die. He's going off to aid Gondor, and he doesn't want Merry to go. And Merry very much wants to go, and Merry says that, yeah, he might die and everything, and it's going to be very dangerous, but what about the songs and the tales? I'll be left out of those. And this goes actually to something that somebody said in chat. Who was this that said this in chat? Let me, I might have to scroll. Oh, Richard. Richard had said being stuck in a never-ending present doesn't sound nice. And that is why Tolkien refers to death as the gift of man. This is why it is really important to die, to pass from the world, and not to linger forever, and why the elves will eventually come to actually feel envious that men could die, and that even the Ainur will grow weary of the world and wish to leave, and they're bound to it, just as the elves are bound to it, especially the Valar, So, this is really important in, Merry is not thinking about the mortal danger. Pippin is not thinking about the mortal danger. They're thinking about how they're going to be remembered, because they know at some point or another they're going to die, because they're mortal. They're not going to linger there forever. So they want to be remembered as having done something great and something big and something good. And that's why they want to be a part of this. And Gandalf respects that, because he is of the Ainur himself, but he's in this sort of quasi-mortal state. He's in this body that gets tired and hungry and thirsty and needs to rest and all this stuff, and can feel pain. and also would age if he wasn't, bearing one of the rings. He's seen Saruman age. He's seen Radagast age, while he himself is he was already old. But all right, time to continue. The sword of Elendil was forged anew by elvish smiths, and on its blade was traced a device of 7 stars set between the crescent moon and the rayed sun. And about them was written many runes, for Aragorn, son of Arathorn, was going to war upon the marches of Mordor. Very bright was that sword when it was made whole again. The light of the sun shone redly in it, and the light of the moon shone cold. And its edge was hard and keen. And Aragorn gave it a new name and called it Anduril, Flame of the West. Okay, I have to stop. I know that was just a paragraph, but we have so much to talk about there. First of all, Anduril. Do the books ever show Merry or Pippin express regret for coming along? Not any more than like Bilbo, the sort of Bilbo idea of, oh man, I wish it was home sort of thing. The only one that has any regret is actually Sam, after he looks into the mirror of Galadriel, and Galadriel even gives him the option of going home, and he says, no, I have to do it, and that's the thing. They all had the option of turning around and going home at any point, and they of course did not. Anduril. Okay, so he says Anduril is Flame of the West. Now, Ril is the last element there. We have to get into a bit of a linguistic interpretation here. Ril means, it doesn't mean flame, because flame is Anor. There's a few other words for flame, but Ril means brilliance. And we see this in Mithril. Mithril is true silver, but that's the translation. The transliteration is brilliant gray, because myth is gray and Ril is brilliance. So Aragorn here is doing something that shows that he is an excellent linguist, because he's being poetic. Andur is referring to Andorre, which is one of the names that Numenor had. Numenor is called a lot of different names. Numenor, Atalanta, Akalabeth, Andorra. And Andorra is also just the land to the west, but it's also the land of gift. So basically, he is saying that that's the west because it was in the west. And the Ril part he's interpreting as flame because it sounds good. Because the other word for flame, Anor, doesn't. What, Anor? It sounds terrible. He knows it has to sound cool. That's basically what it comes down to. It's a sword and it has to have a cool name and it has to have a cool meaning. So in Aragorn's mind, here's what's going on. The sun sets in the west and looks like a flame. And it's brilliant. So I'm referring to the brilliance of a sunset, which looks like flame. So Flame of the West. It's a stretch because it's not direct translation. It's poetry. He's being poetic. And he's also being poetic in the runes that are put on there. 7 stars between the moon and the sun. The 7 stars, that's Numenor. It represents a lot of things. We've talked about 7 stars a lot on the channel. The Valakirka, which is the Big Dipper, the wain, the plow, all the different things that all the different cultures call it. We call it the Big Dipper. The constellation Valakirka, Circle of the Valar. But it also, 7 stars are very, very entrenched in Numenorian culture. Also Dwarven culture, too. 7 stars also represent Moria. Yes, Atlantis. Numenor doesn't come from The Lord of the Rings or any of that. It comes from a story that Tolkien never finished called The Lost Road, which was a time travel story, believe it or not, about people from the present going back to this place called Numenor, which was also called Atalanta. And he realized that, this is a lot like Plato's Atlantis. So yes, very on purpose. Anyway, the 7 stars in the middle. The sun and the moon. Now, this is big. What is the name for the sun? We just talked about an Anor. It technically means flame. It also refers to the sun. Anor, as in Anarion, one of Elendil's sons. What is the word for the moon? Ithil, as in Isildur, the other son. And Aragorn, through a happenstance of his ancestry, is descended from both brothers, making him Isildur's heir and Anarion's heir, the king of Arnor and the king of Gondor. He can reunite everything. Reunite the sword broken in two, just like Elendil's realm broken in two. Gondor and Arnor now being repaired. This is basically just telling you the end of the story on page 290 of about 1200. So there we go. But yes, the Atlantis thing, absolutely on purpose. Aragorn and Gandalf walked together, or sat, speaking of their road and the perils that they would meet, and they pondered the storied and figured maps and books of lore that were in the house of Elrond. Sometimes Frodo was with them, but he was content to lean on their guidance, and he spent as much time as he could with Bilbo. In those last days the hobbits sat together in the evening in the Hall of Fire, and there, among many tales, they heard told in full the lay of Beren and Luthien and the winning of the great jewel. But in the day, while Merry and Pippin were out and about, Frodo and Sam were to be found with Bilbo in his own small room. Then Bilbo would read passages from his book, which still seemed very incomplete, or scraps of his verses, or would take notes of Frodo's adventures. On the morning of the last day, Frodo was alone with Bilbo, and the old hobbit pulled out from under his bed a wooden box. He lifted the lid and fumbled inside. "Here is your sword," he said, "but it was broken, you know. I took it to keep it safe, but I'd forgotten to ask if the smiths could mend it. No time now, so I thought perhaps you would care to have this, don't you know." He took from the box a small sword in an old shabby leathern scabbard. Then he drew it, and on its polished and well-tended blade glittered suddenly, cold and bright. "This is Sting," he said, and thrust it with little effort deep into the wooden beam. "Take it if you like. I shan't want it again, I expect." Frodo accepted it gracefully. "Also there is this," said Bilbo, bringing out a parcel which seemed to be rather heavy for its size. He unwound several folds of old cloth and held up a small shirt of mail. It was close woven of many rings, as supple almost as linen, cold as ice, and harder than steel. It shone like moonlit silver and was studded with white gems. With it was a belt of pearl and crystal. "It is a pretty thing, isn't it?" said Bilbo, moving it in the light. "And useful. It is my dwarf mail that Thorin gave me. I got it back from Meikle Delving before I started and packed it away with my luggage. I brought all the mementos of my journey away with me, except the ring. But I did not expect to use this, and I don't need it now, except to look at sometimes. You hardly feel any weight when you put it on." "I should look... well, I don't think I should look right in it," said Frodo. "Just what I said myself," said Bilbo. "But never mind about looks, you could wear it under your outer clothes. Come on. You must share the secret with me. Don't tell anybody else. But I should feel happier knowing if you were wearing it. I have a fancy it would turn even the knives of the Black Riders," he ended in a low voice. "Very well, I will take it," said Frodo. Bilbo put it on him and fastened Sting upon the glittering belt, and then Frodo put over the top of his old weather-stained breeches, tunic, and jacket. "Just a plain old hobbit you look," said Bilbo. "But there is more about you now than appears on the surface. Good luck to you." He turned away and looked out the window, trying to hum a tune. "I cannot thank you as I should, Bilbo, for this, and for all your past kindness," said Frodo. "Don't try," said the old hobbit, turning round and slapping him on the back. "Ow!" he cried. "You are too hard now to slap. But there you are. Hobbits must stick together, and especially Bagginses. All I ask in return is take as much care of yourself as you can, and bring back all the news you can and any old songs and tales you come by. I'll do my best to finish my book before you return. I should like to write the second book, if I am spared." He broke off and started to... sorry about that. He broke off and turned to the window again, singing softly. "I sit beside the fire and think of all that I have seen, of meadow flowers and butterflies and summers that have been, of yellow leaves and gossamer and autumns that there were, with morning mist and silver sun and wind upon my hair. I sit beside the fire and think of how the world would be when winter comes without a spring that I shall ever see. For still there are so many things that I have never seen. In every wood and every spring there is a different green. I sit beside the fire and think of people long ago, and people who will see a world that I shall never know. But all the while I sit and think of times there were before. I listen for returning feet and voices at the door. Moogle, could you ban that guy, please? There's a spammer in the chat there. So just a brief note here. It's always been my belief that the reason that Bilbo's giving him the sword for a good reason. He had a sword and it was broken, and it can't be repaired in time. Why does he give him the armor? Because he was stabbed. I think Bilbo feels bad about the fact that he supposedly left everything to Frodo, but he took several things with him. He took some money, of course, that's no big deal, but he took his armor and his sword. Frodo could have used that stuff, right? So I always thought that, oh man, Frodo came to Rivendell in a pretty bad state, and it's kind of partly my fault because I never gave him that armor. Thank you, Moogle. It was a cold, gray day near the end of December. The east wind was streaming through the bare branches of the trees and seething in the dark pines in the hills. Ragged clouds were hurrying overhead, dark and low. As the cheerless shadows of the early evening began to fall, the company made ready to set out. They were to start at dusk, for Elrond counseled them to journey under cover of night as often as they could, until they were far from Rivendell. You should fear the many eyes of the servants of Sauron, he said. I do not doubt that news of the discomfiture of the riders has already reached him, and he will be filled with wrath. Soon now his spies on foot and wing will be abroad in the northern lands. Even of the sky above you, you must beware as you go on your way. The company took little gear for war, for their hope was in secrecy, not in battle. Aragorn had Anduril, but no other weapon, and he went forth clad only in rusty green and brown, as a ranger of the wilderness. Boromir had a long sword in fashion like Anduril, but of less lineage, and he bore also a shield in his war horn. Loud and clear it sounds in the valleys and hills, he said. And then let all the foes of Gondor flee. Putting it to his lips, he blew a blast, and the echoes leapt from rock to rock, and all that heard the voice in Rivendell sprang to their feet. Slow should you be to wind that horn again, Boromir, said Elrond, until you stand once more on the borders of your land and dire need is on you. Maybe, said Boromir, but always I have let my horn cry at setting forth. And though thereafter we may walk in the shadows, I will not go forth as a thief in the night. So let's just pause here. And yes, I would also like to thank everyone for being here tonight. Boromir being kind of obstinate here, he's told this is a mission of secrecy, and he's like, that's not really my style. The horn is really important, but what Elrond says is important. Hey, maybe don't do that until you're at the borders of your land and there's dire need. Almost like he knows that Boromir is going to need that horn, and he's going to be in very big danger pretty much right at the border of Gondor. But the other thing here, this horn is really interesting. There's sort of a legend about it. We don't know if it's really true or not, but there's a legend about it that if you do a full blast on it, like blow as hard as you could, whatever kind of sound it actually makes, that no matter where you are in Middle-earth, it will be heard in Minas Tirith. Probably not true, but a cool little legend. But what's really cool is, and we'll talk about this more when we get to it, is that he blows it at the Balrog, and the Balrog actually kind of stops for a moment. But we'll talk to that when we get to that part, obviously. Gimli the dwarf alone wore openly a short shirt of steel rings, for dwarves make light of burdens, and in his belt was a broad-bladed axe. Legolas had a bow and a quiver, and at his belt a long white knife. The younger hobbits wore the swords that they had taken from the barrow, but Frodo took only Sting and his mail coat, as Bilbo wished remained hidden. Gandalf bore his staff, but girt at his side was the elven sword Glamdring, the mate of Orcrist that lay now upon the breast of Thorin under the lonely mountain. All were well furnished by Elrond with thick, warm clothes, and they had jackets and cloaks lined with fur. Spare food and clothes and blankets and other needs were laden on a pony, none other than the poor beast that they had brought from Bree. So to just briefly pause here, now notice that the hobbits, everybody, but they're all given, these jackets and cloaks, their fur lined, they're given warm clothes. They're going to be, traveling. It's December, it's winter, and they're going to be going over mountains at some point. Well, they're going to be going under mountains at some point, but as far as they know, they're going to be going over mountains at some point. It's going to be cold. Note the one thing that Tolkien left out here, and he actually planned on adding this bit and never got around to it, is boots for the hobbits. The hobbits are barefoot, and people ask sometimes, hey, how could they, we get it, they have tough feet, but how could they deal with, walking across like snow at Carithros and stuff like that, and why didn't they have boots? And he actually wanted to include something a little bit here where Elrond would give them boots, and that they would say, hey, we really don't wear shoes, and he'd be like, hey, you might actually really need these, to think nothing of going through like the dead marshes and dealing with all the insects and everything inherent to that, You don't see a join button on the channel page. Okay, well, if you go to any video, including this one that you're watching, you should see it. But if you don't see it, or if it doesn't work, what you could do is just look at the description. And I believe the very first thing in the description is a join link. And the reason that I include that is because I had two fellows actually, but originally it was one, who said, hey, I'm trying to join and the button's not working. Can you fix that? And I'm like, well, I don't really work for YouTube. I can't really fix their website if it's not working properly. But what I did is I went ahead and put a link there. So in the description for this live stream and for any video that I have up, you should see a join button and a join link. And if you're going to join, I thank you for that greatly, because it really helps me out. And you get to see the videos early. And there's some emotes that you could use. As a matter of fact, Alice or Richard or Zach or anyone in chat who has the little Gandalf rune next to your name, any of the members, if you could show off the emotes in chat, I would be appreciated. All right, let's move on here. The stay in Rivendell had worked a great wonder of change on him. He was glossy and seemed to have the vigor of youth. It was Sam who had insisted on choosing him, declaring that Bill, as he called him, would pine if he did not come. That animal could nearly talk, he said, and would talk if he stayed here much longer. He gave me a look as plain as Mr. Pippin could speak it. If you don't let me go with you, Sam, I'll follow you on my own. So Bill was going as the beast of burden, yet he was the only member of the company that did not seem depressed. Their farewells had been said in the great hall by the fire, and they were only waiting now for Gandalf, who had not yet come out of the house. A gleam of firelight came from the open doors, and soft lights were glowing in many windows. Bilbo, huddled in a cloak, stood silent by the doorstep beside Frodo. Aragorn sat with his head bowed to his knees. Only Elrond knew fully what this hour meant to him. The others could be seen as grey shapes in the darkness. Sam was standing by the pony, sucking his teeth, and staring moodily into the gloom where the river roared stonily below. His desire for adventure was at its lowest ebb. "Bill, my lad," he said, "you oughtn't have to took up with us. You could have stayed here, and at the best hay till the new grass comes." Bill swished his tail and said nothing. Sam eased the pack on his shoulders and went over anxiously in his mind all the things that he had stowed in it, wondering if he had forgotten anything. His chief treasure, his cooking gear, and the little box of salt that he always carried and refilled when he could. A good supply of pipeweed, but not near enough, I'll warrant. Flint and tinder, woolen hose, linen, various small belongings of his master's that Frodo had forgotten and Sam had stowed to bring them out in triumph when they were called for. He went through them all. Oh, I get that you don't use them. I'm just asking if you could, just to show them to people who aren't members who might be interested here. I'll do it. Can I do it? Let's see. Oh, that's not it. I'm more familiar with the the way it works on... Oh, here we are. I found them. On Twitch than on YouTube. Those are the emotes. There we go. We got it. I fixed it. Those are the emotes there. We have a One Ring, a Silmaril, and the Eye of Sauron. I'll have to add some more though. Those are the 3 that I first made when I first became partner and was able to make them and whatnot. But I'll have to make some more. I think. I don't know how many you can do. "Rope," he muttered. "No rope. And only last night you said to yourself, 'Sam, what about a bit of rope? You'll want it if you haven't got it.' Well, I'll want it. I can't get it now." At that moment Elrond came out with Gandalf, and he called the company to him. "This is my last word," he said in a low voice. "The ring-bearer is setting out on the quest of Mount Doom. On him alone is any charge laid. Neither to cast away the ring, nor to deliver to any servant of the enemy, nor indeed to let any handle it, save members of the company and the council, and only then in gravest need. The others go with him as free companions to help him on his way. You may tarry, or come back, or turn aside in other paths as chance allows. The further you go, the less easy will it be to withdraw. Yet no oath or bond is laid on you to go further than you will, for you do not yet know the strength of your hearts, and you cannot foresee what each may meet upon the road." We have to talk about this. Oh, you don't know how to do it? It's in the chat thing. There's like a little smiley face where you type. That's how you could add the emotes. But like I said, you don't have to if you don't use them. Oh, there you go. You found it. There's the Eye of Sauron. Okay, we have to talk about this because a few people have asked me. This came up on Quora, and I believe I put it into a video. Why didn't Elrond make them all swear to go with Frodo till the very end? And I say, well, obviously, there were some of them that were never planning on it. Boromir is going to Minas Tirith. Aragorn is planning on going to Minas Tirith. Even, after all that goes down and Gandalf, he freaking dies. I mean, he comes back, but he freaking dies. Aragorn at one point changes his mind, and he's like, okay, me and Frodo and Sam and Gimli will go to Mordor, and Boromir, you could take Merry and Pippin and Legolas with you. That doesn't happen, because Boromir blows up that plan. But here's the thing. He says this very, very specifically. I'm going to read that part again here, if I could find it. No oath or bond is laid on you to go further than you will. Now, the word oath is really, really important. And it comes up later in The Lord of the Rings with the characters known as the Oathbreakers, also known as the Dead Men of Dunharrow, also commonly referred to as the Dead Army. They had taken an oath to Isildur, actually, and they didn't do it. They didn't do what they were supposed to do. They broke their oath. And because of that, they're actually denied the gift of man. They're dead in the way that their bodies died and decayed, and they're just ghosts. But they're not dead because they haven't passed from the world. They've been denied the afterlife. They're like wraiths in a way. And and this is really terrible. It's just this lingering that they can only do. They can only pass from the world and go to the afterlife once they have actually fulfilled their oath. So, no one knows better than Elrond, though, the horrible power of an oath. Because he had parents, like anyone does. His father was a guy named Rivendell, his mother, a woman named Elwing. But he wasn't really raised by them. He was raised by 2 brothers named Mathros and Maglor. And they were 2 of the sons of Feanor, and along with Feanor and 5 more of their brothers, they took a terrible, terrible oath. And they became mass murderers, slaying elves on a grand scale on no less than 3 different occasions. And at some point, they actually kidnapped Elrond and his brother, and they were going to kill them, but then decided to raise them. So Elrond is a guy who was raised by kidnappers, who also were mass murdering psychopaths. He turned out pretty good, didn't he? But that, aside from that, he knows that the reason they were like that is because they swore an oath to retrieve the Silmarils at any and all cost, and that anyone who keeps them away from them or hinders them in any way would be slain, no matter who they are, even if it was their own kin. And these two, out of all the 8 guys that took this oath, Feanor and his 7 sons, they were the ones that kind of regretted it the most. They realized after not very long that they had made a really big mistake. But that didn't absolve them from their oath, because they didn't just say, yeah, I promise. They swore an oath to Iluvatar. And Iluvatar had, God, he has this attitude of, you won't take my name in vain. If you're going to swear on my name with Manwë and the Valar as your witness that you're going to do something, you're going to do it. And so even when they just tried, have you ever tried not being a murderer? When they tried that, it gnawed at them. And they felt it in their soul, And like I said, these are the guys that basically acted as Elrond's 2 dads. They raised him and his brother Elros, who became the first king of Númenor. So he turned out pretty good too. Really shows you that with the elves, they could, given unlimited time on this earth, they could rise beyond the occasion. But yeah, these 2 boys who, obviously Elros is long gone. He became mortal. He died. Elrond's still here. They would know more than anyone the power of an oath, and that you should not ever make someone take an oath for you, because that's what Feanor did. What Feanor does with his own life is his own business, but basically forcing all 7 of his sons to take the oath with him, that was pretty horrible. And when he was dying after, just being struck down by Gothmog and just, almost torn to pieces by the Balrogs, and his sons managed to get him away from the Balrogs, and he had time enough left before he died and passed to Mandos to wait for the end of the world. He had just enough time to say some last words to them. And they weren't regrets or anything nice. It was to make them reiterate their oath. Because he was still under the power of that oath. So there you have it. So that's why Elrond would tell them, hey, look, guys, you're all volunteers and you could stop at any time. Because he knows better than anyone that compelling someone into that kind of service is one of the worst things you can do. And he saw all the events of the first age and all the horrible things that happened. Faithless is he that says farewell when the road darkens, said Gimli. Maybe, said Elrond, but let him not vow to walk in the dark who has not seen the nightfall. Yet sworn word may strengthen quaking heart, said Gimli. Or break it, said Elrond. Look not too far ahead, but go now with good hearts. Farewell, and may the blessing of elves and men and all free folk go with you. May the stars shine upon your faces. Good luck, cried Bilbo, stuttering with the cold. I don't suppose you will be able to keep a diary, Frodo, my lad, but I shall expect a full account when you get back. And don't be too long. Farewell. Just a brief note here, Gimli stating, hey, I'll take an oath. Also, the phrase that Elrond uses here, let the stars shine upon your faces. I've talked about this a few times. Elf is derived, in universe at least, from Eldar. You'll notice the EL prefix having a lot to do with anybody who has anything to do with the elves. His 2 sons are Eladon and Elrohir. He's Elrond. His brother was Elros. Elendil meant elf friend. El actually means stars. The elves are associated with the stars. So when he's saying, let the stars shine upon your faces, it's sort of like a Vulcan saying, live long and prosper. Many others of Elrond's household stood in the shadows and watched them go, bidding them farewell with soft voices. There was no laughter and no song or music. At last they turned away and faded silently into the dusk. They crossed the bridge and wound slowly up the long steep paths that led out of the cloven vale of Rivendell, and they came at length to the high moor, where the wind hissed through the heather. Then, with one glance at the last homely house twinkling below them, they strode away far into the night. At the ford of Bruinen they left the road, and turning southward went by narrow paths along folded lands. Their purpose was to hold this course west of the mountains for many miles and days. The country was much rougher and more barren than in the green vale of the great river and wilder land on the other side of the range, and their going would be slow, but they hoped in this way to escape the notice of unfriendly eyes. The spies of Sauron had hitherto seldom been seen in this empty country, and the paths were little known except to the people of Rivendell. Gandalf walked in front, and with him went Aragorn, who knew this land even in the dark. The others were in file behind, and Legolas, whose eyes were keen, was in the rear guard. The first part of their journey was hard and dreary, and Frodo remembered little of it save the wind. For many sunless days an icy blast came from the mountains in the east, and no garment seemed able to keep out its searching fingers. Though the company went well clad, they seldom felt warm, either moving or at rest. They slept uneasily during the middle of the day, in some hollow of the land, or hidden under the tangled thorn bushes that grew in thickets in many places. In the late afternoon they were roused by the watch, and took their chief meal, cold and cheerless as a rule, for they could seldom risk the lighting of a fire. In the evening they went on again, always as nearly southward as they could find a way. At first it seemed to the hobbits that, though they walked and stumbled till they were weary, they were creeping forward like snails, and getting nowhere. Each day the land looked much the same as it had the day before, yet steadily the mountains were drawing nearer. South of Rivendell they rose ever higher and bent westwards, and about the feet of the main range that was tumbled an ever wider land of bleak hills and deep valleys filled with turbulent waters. Paths were few and winding, and led them often only to the edge of some sheer fall, or down into treacherous swamps. Oh, hold on one moment. There we go. Okay. They had been a fortnight on the way when the weather changed. The wind suddenly fell and then veered round to the south. The swift-flowing clouds lifted and melted away, and the sun came out, pale and bright. There came a cold, clear dawn at the end of a long, stumbling night march. The travellers reached a low ridge crowned with ancient holly trees, whose grey-green trunks seemed to have been built out of the very stone of the hills. Their dark leaves shone, and their berries glowed red in the light of the rising sun. Away in the south, Frodo could see the dim shapes of lofty mountains that seemed now to stand across the path that the company was taking. At the left of this high range rose 3 peaks. The tallest and nearest stood up like a tooth, tipped with snow. Its great, bare, northern precipice was still largely in the shadow, but where the sunlight slanted upon it, it glowed red. Gandalf stood at Frodo's side and looked out under his hand. "We have done well," he said. "We have reached the borders of the country that men call Hollin. Many elves lived here in happier days when Eregion was its name. 45 leagues as the crow flies we have come, though many long miles further our feet have walked. The land and the weather will be milder now, but perhaps all the more dangerous." "Dangerous or not, a real sunrise is mighty welcome," said Frodo, throwing back his hood and letting the morning light fall on his face. "But the wood in the night." "No," said Gandalf, "but you see further ahead in the clear light. Beyond those peaks the range bends round southwest. There are many maps in Elrond's home, but I suppose you never thought to look at them." "Yes, I did sometimes," said Pippin. "But I don't remember them. Frodo has a better head for that sort of thing." "I need no map," said Gimli, who had come up with Legolas, and was gazing out before him, with a strange light in his deep eyes. "This is the land where our fathers worked of old, and we have wrought the image of those mountains into many works of metal and of stone, and into many songs and tales. They stand tall in our dreams, Baraz, Zirak, Shathur. Only once before have I seen them, from afar in this waking life. But I know not their names. But I know them and their names. For under them lies Khazad-dûm, the Doro-dwelf, that is called the Black Pit, Moria in the Elvish tongue. I have to stop and drink some water. I'm messing up too much here. All right, that should help. I'm going to start that part over here. I need no map, said Gimli, who had come up with Legolas, and was gazing out behind him with a strange light in his deep eyes. There is the land where our fathers worked of old, and we have wrought the image of those mountains into many works of metal and of stone, and into many songs and tales. They stand tall in our dreams. Baraz, Zirak, Shathur. Only once before have I seen them from afar in waking life. But I know them in their names, for under them lies Khazad-dûm, the Dwarf elf, that is now called the Black Pit, Moria in the Elvish tongue. Yonder stands Baranzabar, the Redhorn, cruel Carathras, and beyond him are Silvertine and Cloudyhead, Celebdil the White, and Fenuthdil the Grey, that we call Ziraxagil, and Bundushathor. Just a brief commentary on the mountains here and Gimli. Now, interesting that he says this waking life, which is interesting because of the dwarvish creation myth, which we'll of course we'll get to that when we eventually read the Silmarillion. But of course there were originally 13 dwarves, 7 fathers and 6 mothers, and they were made at a time when the elves and the men had not appeared yet. And they were made by the Vala Aula. And Iluvatar saw what Aula did and spoke to him. Said, "You shouldn't have done that. What are you doing?" And he had only made the 7 fathers of the dwarves at this point. And, they had their whole tete-a-tete, and he said, all right. Eventually, Iluvatar said, we'll let these dwarves be part of the world, but I have a whole plan for when the men are going to appear and for when the elves are going to appear. So let's have them slumber. So, the dwarves are interesting because they're really in touch with their creation, more so than I think than the elves are and the men are, because you never hear them talking about the awakening. But we get this little brief reference that Gimli makes to this waking life, because here's the thing: dwarves don't really die like men do or like hobbits do, because they're mortal. They have a lifespan, but they don't have an afterlife. They're not the children of Iluvatar. They weren't in the Einarlindala, the Song of Creation. And I just realized that the light is kind of peeking through there. Let me just... Yeah, okay, that should fix it. So they don't have a place set aside for them. So when they die, when their bodies give out or they're slain or whatever, they go to the halls of Mandos and they just stay there and they wait. They slumber. So this is like, hey, this is the brief period of time in the world where we're going to be awake. So we're going to refer to it as the awaking life. And thank you, Chewy, for joining the channel as a member. Welcome to the role of Legendarium Scholar. I'm still having an issue with the light here. If we can just kind of move that. There we go. That helped. You know what it is the heater just came on, and the vent is there, and it kind of makes the green screen flutter a little bit. That's just the way it is. Thank you so much for joining the channel, Chewy. Enjoy the emotes, and also enjoy your little Gandalf rune, and enjoy seeing all the videos early. For example, this is a live that you're watching, and anybody can watch my live streams, but after it's over, I make it members only for a period of a few weeks before it is available for everyone to watch. So, because I want the members to have a reason to pay that $5 a month. But thank you so much for becoming a member. Also, the names of the mountains, he mentions a few important ones. Carathras, which he calls cruel, which is where they're going to try to cross, and of course, fail miserably. And he mentions the Redhorn Pass, which is where Elrond's wife tried to cross and failed miserably. She got captured by some orcs and tortured and poisoned. And she's alive. She was rescued by her sons, Elladan and Elrohir, and then Elrond healed her. But she was kind of fed up with Middle-earth at that point, and she sailed to the west. And a lot of people say, why wouldn't Elrond stick around in Middle-earth at least until Arwen passes? Seems kind of weird. You got to remember what he's going to, his wife, his parents, she's been over there for a while now. There was one other of the mountains that I wanted to talk about. Fanuithel the Grey, which the dwarves call Ziraxagil. That's the mountain peak that the Gandalf and the Balrog are going to have their final confrontation on that mountain peak. All right, let's continue. There the misty mountains divide, and between their arms lies the deep-shadowed valley, which we cannot forget, as in Elizabeth, the Dimral Dale, which the elves call Nardhirion. It is for the Dimral Dale that we are making, said Gandalf. If we'd climb the pass that is called the Redhorn Gate, onto the far side of Caradhras, we shall come down by the Dimral Stair into the deep vale of the dwarves. There lies the Miramir, and there the river Silverlode rises in icy springs. Dark is the water of Caladzaram, said Gimli, and cold are the springs of Kibble-Nala. My heart trembles at the thought that I may see them soon. May you have joy of the sight, my good dwarf, said Gandalf. But whatever you may do, we at least cannot stay in that valley. We must go down the Silverlode into the secret woods, and so to the great river, and then... He paused. Yes, and where then? Asked Merry. To the end of our journey, in the end, said Gandalf. We cannot look too far ahead. Let us be glad that the first stage is safely over. I think we will rest here. Not only today, but tonight as well. There is a wholesome air about Holland. Much evil must befall the country before it wholly forgets the elves, if once they dwelt there. That is true, said Legolas. But the elves of this land were of a race strange to us of the sylvan folk, and the trees and the grass do not now remember them. Only I hear the stones lament them. Deep they delved us, fair they wrought us, high they builded us, but they are gone, they are gone. They sought the havens long ago. Real interesting. So Legolas here. I keep saying Legolas because that's the way they say it in the movie. It really should be Legolas. That's really the right way of saying it, but it's kind of hard to break out of that pattern of always saying Legolas. He speaks to rocks. This is a really interesting thing. This is sort of one of the first stories that Tolkien is writing where an elf is a primary character, a main character. Elrond is sort of different because he's Perithel, he's half-elf, and he's not a primary character in this story, nor was he a primary character in The Hobbit. The Children of Húrin had elves in it, but they weren't the main characters. The Fall of Gondolin was all about elves, but he hadn't really finished it, and those characters weren't as thought out as Legolas is going to be here. So we see some strange things. Legolas speaks to rocks. He walks on the top of snow. He sleeps standing up and pacing back and forth. There's some weirdness about him. He's sort of unique. He also makes a comment here, strange to us of the sylvan folk. Now, this is interesting, because Legolas is not, in fact, a sylvan elf. He is Sindar. He is of the same sort of people as Eleuthingel was. Eleuthingel, and of course his kingdom of Doriath, and one of his kinsmen, which was Legolas' grandfather, went to Mirkwood. It wasn't called Mirkwood back then. It was Greenwood the Great, and founded a kingdom there. But here's the thing, is he didn't bring a whole bunch of Sindar elves with him and found a country there. He went there where there were already elves, and they took him as their king. So they adopted a sylvan lifestyle and a sylvan... the word is escaping me here, and it's a very simple word. Culture. And really, the type of elf that you are, there's so many different types. There's Noldor, there's Teleri, there's a lot of different types of Teleri. There's Falmari, there's Sindar, there's Vanyar, there's Nandor, there's Sylvan, there's Avari, and there are still others than those that I have mentioned, but the divides are cultural. They're all kin, they're all the same thing, basically. So it's interesting here that though Legolas, by birth, his father Thranduil, he's somewhat related to Eleuthingel, and in fact also to Celeborn. He's a Cinda, but he considers himself a Sylvan Elf because he lives as a Sylvan Elf. So that's an interesting little point that's made there. That morning they lit a fire in the deep hollow shrouded by great bushes of holly, and their supper breakfast was merrier than it had been since they set out. They did not hurry to bed afterwards, for they expected to have all the night to sleep in, and they did not mean to go on again until the evening of the next day. Only Aragorn was silent and restless. After a while he left the company and wandered out to the ridge, where he stood in the shadow of a tree, looking out southward and westwards, with his head posed as if he were listening. Then he returned to the brink of the dell and looked down at the others laughing and talking. "What is the matter, Strider?" Merry called out. "What are you looking for? Do you miss the east wind?" "No, indeed," he answered, "but I miss something. I have been in the country of Holland in many seasons. No folk dwell here now, but many other creatures live here at all times, especially birds. Yet now all things but you are silent. I can feel it. There is no sound for miles about us, and your voices seem to make the ground echo. I do not understand it." Gandalf looked up with sudden interest. "But what do you guess is the reason?" he asked. "Is there more in it that's surprised at seeing 4 hobbits, not to mention the rest of us, where people are so seldom seen or heard?" "I hope that is it," answered Aragorn. "But I have a sense of watchfulness and of fear that I have never had here before." "Then we must be more careful," said Gandalf. "If you bring a ranger with you, it is well to pay attention to him, especially if the ranger is Aragorn. We must stop talking aloud, rest quietly, and set the watch." Does this mean that Legolas is young enough to have grown up among Sylvans, maybe? Absolutely yes. Absolutely yes. We never, ever, not even once, get an age for Legolas. He's old enough to consider Aragorn and Gimli children, because, Gimli's 139, Aragorn is 87. He's about to turn 88 in a little bit, well, in a few months. But I would estimate that he's probably about as old as Arwen is. He's sort of the young prince. Note that he wasn't with Thranduil when Thranduil went out to the Lonely Mountain. Of course, we know that Tolkien hadn't created the character yet. But I'm just saying that, he was probably the young prince who was staying at home at that point, He's not that old, likely. When they made the movie versions, they gave him a birth date and an age. It's not, canon to the books, but they did basically what I expected. They made him about 2,700 years old, which, means that he definitely grew up in Mirkwood. I feel like he was almost certainly born in the Third Age, before or after the initial fall of Sauron there, Oh, okay. Okay, William. I was thinking about that, actually. You're right. We are sort of annotating the book. I always wanted to do readings in live streams. Always wanted to do it. And, and I looked into it, and there's a whole copyright mess. And I talked about it with a few friends, and we decided that the way to go about it is to make it educational, to analyze the text, and and that's right on my alley. But yeah, we are basically annotating it, which is interesting. It was Sam's turn that day to take up first watch, but Aragorn joined him. The others fell asleep. Then the silence grew until even Sam felt it. The breathing of the sleepers could be plainly heard. The swish of the pony's tail and the occasional movements of his feet became loud noises. Sam could hear his own joints creaking if he stirred. Dead silence was around him, and all over hung a clear blue sky as the sun rode up from the east. Away in the south a dark patch appeared and grew, and drove north like a flying smoke in the wind. "What's that, Strider? It don't look like a cloud," said Sam in a whisper to Aragorn. He made no answer. He was gazing intently at the sky, but before long Sam could see for himself what was approaching. Flocks of birds, flying at great speed, were wheeling and circling, and traversing all the land as if they were searching for something, and they were steadily drawing nearer. "Lie flat and still," hissed Aragorn, pulling Sam down into the shade of a holly bush, for a whole regiment of birds had broken away suddenly from the main host and came, flying low, straight towards the ridge. Sam thought they were a kind of crow of large size. As they passed overhead, in so dense a throng that their shadow followed them darkly over the ground below, one harsh croak was heard. Not until they had dwindled into the distance, north and west, and the sky was again clear, would Aragorn rise. Then he sprang up and went and wakened Gandalf. "Regiments of black crows are flying over all the land between the mountains and the Grey Flood," he said, "and they have passed over Holland. They are not natives here. They are Crabine out of Fangorn and Dunland. I do not know what they are about. Possibly there is some trouble away south from which they are fleeing, but I think they are spying out the land. I have also glimpsed many hawks flying high up in the sky. I think we ought to move again this evening. Holland is no longer wholesome for us. It is being watched." "And in that case, so is the Red Horn Gate," said Gandalf. "And how we can get over that without being seen, I cannot imagine. But we will think of that when we must. As for moving soon as it is dark, I am afraid that you are right. Luckily our fire made little smoke and had burned low before... this is Aragorn, I'm sorry. Luckily our fire made little smoke and had burned low before the Crabine came," said Aragorn. "It must be put out now and not lit again." "Well, if that isn't a plague and a nuisance," said Pippin. The news, no fire, and a move again by night had been broken to him as soon as he woke in the late afternoon. All because of a pack of crows. "I had looked forward to a real good meal tonight, something hot." "Well, you could go on looking forward," said Gandalf. "There may be many unexpected feasts ahead for you. For myself, I should like a pipe to smoke in comfort and warmer feet. However, we are certain of one thing at any rate. It will get warmer as we get south." "Too warm, I should wonder," muttered Sam to Frodo. "But I'm beginning to think that it's time we got a sight of that fiery mountain, and saw the end of the road, so to speak. I thought at first that this here Redhorn, or whatever its name is, might be it, till Gimli spoke his piece. A fair jaw-cracker dwarf language must be." Maps conveyed nothing to Sam's mind, and all distances in these strange lands seemed so vast that he was quite out of his reckoning. So, to pause here, Sam says something very silly. He saw, Redhorn Mountain, and he thought, that must be Mount Doom. We're close, And it's actually kind of a callback to something that happened in The Hobbit, where the first mountain that Bilbo saw, he thought, that must be the Lonely Mountain. And Thorin's like, of course it's not. What is wrong with you? Yeah, for it to be copyright safe, we have to interrupt fairly often. Yeah. You've seen a reading of The Lord of the Rings on YouTube? Well, yeah, here's the thing. I mean, it's sort of like if you get pulled over, and the cop tells you you were going such and such speed, and you say, well, so was everybody else, and then they tell you, well, I can't catch everybody, you're the unlucky person. Just because it's done doesn't mean that it's legal. And for me to keep the channel and keep it growing and everything, we have to make sure everything's, across the board and above the board, So, like I said, I did quite a bit of research on this, even tried to look into actually getting permission from the Tolkien estate to do these, but unfortunately they will grant permission, but they can't be live streamed. That's the thing. It has to be like, you sitting in a chair at a library with a group of people, that sort of thing. And I will tell you, the Tolkien estate, they can be fairly capricious at times. I'm going to put something on the screen that they're not going to be happy about if they ever see this. And that's the thing. People like the analyses. Let me... you know what? I know I'm sitting here in Rivendell with you guys, but I'm just going to dash on over to Mirkwood for just a moment here. If I could find that screen. Here we are. So there's my Morgoth coin. There are only about 100 of these ever made. I'll show you the other side that has Ancalagon on it. There are only about 100 of these ever made. And they're actually illegal to sell. The company that made them, the very day that they put them on sale, they got a letter from the Tolkien estate saying, no, you can't. You can't do that. They had permission to make and sell coins based on the Lord of the Rings, but it was like, hey, that's not actually from the Lord of the Rings, so you can't use it. I have to fix the green screen, guys. I'm sorry. Let's just see if we could get this situated here. It's better. It's not perfect, but... So that's the issue there. I actually am not really one for audiobooks personally, but yeah, that's just a personal thing. The voice that I'm hearing has to be my own in my head, or if I'm reading aloud, which I often do actually, so I could do like voices and stuff, which is what I'm doing for you guys. But yeah, Sam's comment here is sort of a callback. But anyway, yeah, so the company that made those coins, they're not allowed to sell them. The reason that I got one is because while they're not allowed to sell them, they can give them away. All right, this is really bugging me. What is with the screen today? I think I have to go into the settings briefly. I'm sorry for this interruption, but you know what? I moved it today to do a bit of cleaning, and now it's all screwy. That there. That's bugging me. Let me see if I can go into the filter and adjust it slightly. That got rid of it. Okay. I just upped the number slightly from 463 to 475 there. Hey there, Daryl. How's it going? Yeah, you're the big audiobook person. My friend Axel from Sweden, he loves audiobooks. And I think he asked me about The Lord of the Rings, and I said, well, you can get it with Andy Serkis reading it. And he's like, hey, sold. All right, that was Sam's little blunder about the mountain was where we were, right? All that day, the company remained in hiding. The dark birds passed over now and again, but as the westering sun grew red, they disappeared southwards. At dusk, the company set out, and turning now half east, they steered their course towards Carathrus, which far away still glowed faintly red in the last light of the vanished sun. One by one, white stars sprang forth as the sky faded. Guided by Aragorn, they struck a good path. It looked to Frodo like the remains of an ancient road, and had once been broad and well planned, from Holland to the mountain pass. The moon, now at the full, rose over the mountains and cast a pale light in which the shadows of stones were black. Many of them looked to have been worked by hands, though now they lay tumbled and ruinous in a bleak, barren land. It was the cold, chill hour before the first stir of dawn, and the moon was low. Frodo looked up at the sky. Suddenly he saw or felt a shadow pass over the high stars, as if for a moment they faded and then flashed out again. He shivered. "Did you see anything pass over?" he whispered to Gandalf, who was just ahead. "No, but I felt it, whatever it was," he whispered. "It may be nothing, but a wisp of thin cloud." "It was moving fast then," muttered Aragorn, "and not with the wind." Nothing further happened that night. The next morning dawned even brighter than before, but the air was chill again. Already the wind was turning back towards the east. For 2 more nights they marched on, climbing steadily but ever more slowly as their road wound up into the hills, and the mountains towered up nearer and nearer. On the 3rd morning Carathrus rose before them, a mighty peak, tipped with snow like silver, but with sheer, naked sides, dull red as if stained with blood. There was a black look in the sky, and the sun was wan. The wind had gone now round to the northeast. Gandalf snuffed the air and looked back. "Winter deepens behind us," he said quietly to Aragorn. "The heights away north are whiter than they were. Snow is lying far down their shoulders. Tonight we shall be on our highway high up towards the Redhorn Gate. We may well be seen by watchers on that narrow path, and waylaid by some evil, but the weather may prove a more deadly enemy than any. What do you think of your course now, Aragorn?" Frodo overheard these words and understood that Gandalf and Aragorn were continuing some debate that had begun long before. He listened anxiously. I think no good of our course from beginning to end, as you know well, Gandalf, answered Aragorn. And perils known and unknown will grow as we go on, but we must go on. And it is no good our delaying the passage of the mountains. Further south there are no passes till one comes to the gap of Rohan. I do not trust the way, since your news of Saruman. Who knows which side now the marshals of the Horse Lords serve? Who knows indeed, said Gandalf. But there is another way, and not by the pass of Caradhras, the dark and secret way that we have spoken of. But let us not speak of it again. Not yet. Say nothing to the others, I beg, not till it is plain that there is no other way. We must decide before we go further, answered Gandalf. Then let us weigh the matter in our minds while the others rest and sleep, said Aragorn. So, this is interesting because they're obviously having a bit of an argument here. And it's weighing very heavily on Gandalf's mind. You're going to have to confiscate my Morgoth coin. I mean, I don't know. Maybe I could get you one, WT. I'd have to talk to the Shire Post people. Forest reading. Thank you for pointing that out, Moogle. I'm sorry. I forgot to switch back. Yeah. I'm sorry about that. Okay. Oh, that's cool, Chewie. Maybe I'd have to listen to it one day. I'm not, I'm not a big audiobook person, but that might be interesting. And it doesn't seem all that expensive either. Gandalf's already like, hey, what if we went through Moria? And Aragorn's like, not only no, but shut up as well. He really, really doesn't want to go through Moria. I mean, nobody really wants to go through, but this is Gandalf's big idea. In the late afternoon, while the others are finishing their breakfast, Gandalf and Aragorn went aside together and stood looking at Caradhras. Its sides were now dark and sullen, and its head was in a grey cloud. Frodo watched them, wondering which way the debate would go. When they returned to the company, Gandalf spoke, and then he knew that it had been decided to face the weather in the high pass. He was relieved. He could not guess what was the other dark and secret way, but the very mention of it had seemed to fill Aragorn with dismay, and Frodo was glad that it had been abandoned. From signs that we have seen lately, said Gandalf, I fear that the Red Horn Gate may be watched, and also I have doubts of the weather that is coming up behind. Snow may come. We must go with all the speed that we can. Even so, it will take us more than 2 marches before we reach the top of the pass. Dark will come early this evening. We must leave as soon as you can get ready. I will add a word of advice, if I may, said Boromir. I was born under the shadow of the White Mountains, and know something of journeys in the high places. We shall meet bitter cold, if no worse, before we come down on the other side. It will not help us to keep so secret that we are frozen to death. When we leave here, where there are still a few trees and bushes, each of us should carry a bundle of wood as large as he can bear. And Bill could take a bit more, couldn't you, lad? Said Sam. The pony looked at him mournfully. Very well, said Gandalf, but we must not use the wood, not unless it is a choice between fire and death. The company set out again with good speed at first, but soon their way became steep and difficult. The twisting and climbing road had, in many places, almost disappeared, and was blocked with many fallen stones. The night grew deadly dark under the great clouds. A bitter wind swirled along the rocks. By midnight they had climbed to the knees of the great mountains. Their narrow path now wound under a sheer wall of cliffs to the left, above which the grim flanks of Caradhras towered up invisible in the gloom. On the right was a gulf of darkness, where the land fell suddenly into a deep ravine. Laboriously they climbed a sharp slope, and halted for a moment at the top. Frodo felt a soft touch on his face. He put out his arm and saw the dim white flakes of snow settling on his sleeve. They went on, but before long the snow was falling fast, filling all the air and swirling into Frodo's eyes. The dark bent shapes of Gandalf and Aragorn, only a place or two ahead, could hardly be seen. I don't like this at all, panted Sam just behind. Snow's all right on a fine morning, but I like to be in bed while it's falling. I wish this lot would go off to Hobbiton. Folk might welcome it there. Except on the high moors of the North Farthing, a heavy fall was rare in the Shire, and was regarded as a pleasant event and a chance for fun. No living hobbit, save Bilbo, could remember the fell winter of 1311, when white wolves invaded the Shire over the frozen Brandywine. Gandalf halted. Snow was thick on his hood and shoulders. It was already ankle-deep about his boots. "This is what I feared," he said. "What do you say now, Aragorn?" "That I feared it too," Aragorn answered, "but less than other things. I knew the risk of snow, though it seldom falls heavily so far south, save high up in the mountains, but we are not as high yet as we are still far down, where the paths are usually open all the winter." "I wonder if this is a contrivance of the enemy," said Boromir. "They say in my land that he can govern the storms in the mountains of shadow that stand upon the borders of Mordor. He has strange powers and many allies." "His arm has grown long indeed," said Gimli, "if he can draw snow down from the north to trouble us here 300 leagues away." "His arm has grown long," said Gandalf. While they were halted, the wind died down, and the snow slackened until it was almost ceased. They tramped on again, but they had not gone more than a furlong when the storm returned with fresh fury. The wind whistled, and the snow became a blinding blizzard. Soon even Boromir found it hard to keep going. The hobbits, bent nearly double, toiled along behind the taller folk, but it was plain that they could not go much further if the snow continued. Frodo's feet felt like lead. Pippin was dragging behind. Even Gimli, as stout as any dwarf could be, was grumbling as he trudged. The company halted suddenly, as if they had come to agreement without any words being spoken. They heard eerie noises in the darkness round them. It may have been only a trick of the wind in the cracks and gullies of the rocky wall, but the sounds were those shrill cries and wild howls of laughter. Stones began to fall from the mountainside, whistling over their heads or crashing on the path beside them. Every now and again they heard a dull rumble as a great boulder rolled down from the hidden heights above. "We cannot go further tonight," said Boromir. "Let those who call the wind who will. There are fell voices in the air, and the stones are aimed at us." "I do call it the wind," said Aragorn, "but that does not make what you say untrue. There are many evil and unfriendly things in the world that have little love for those that go on 2 legs, and yet are not in league with Sauron, but have purposes of their own. Some have been in this world longer than he." "Carathrus was called the Cruel and had an ill name," said Gimli, "long years ago, when rumour of Sauron had not been heard in these lands." "It matters little who is the enemy if we cannot beat off his attack," said Gandalf. "But what can we do?" cried Pippin miserably. He was leaning on Merry and Frodo, and he was shivering. "Either stop where we are or go back," said Gandalf. "It is no good going on, only a little higher, if I remember rightly. This path leaves the cliff and runs into a wide, shallow trough at the bottom of a long, hard slope. We should have no shelter there from snow or stones or anything else." "And it is no good going back while the storm holds," said Aragorn. "We have passed no place on the way that offered more shelter than this cliff wall we are under now." "Shelter," muttered Sam. "If this is shelter, then one wall and no roof make a house." The company now gathered together as close to the cliff as they could. It faced southward, and near the bottom it leaned out a little, so they hoped that it would give them some protection from the northerly wind from the falling stones. But eddying blasts swirled around them from every side, and the snow flowed down, even denser clouds. They huddled together with their backs to the wall. Bill the pony stood patiently but dejectedly in front of the hobbits, and screened them a little. But before long the drifting snow was above his hocks, and it went on mounting. If they had no larger companions, the hobbits would soon have been entirely buried. A great sleepiness came over Frodo, and he felt himself sinking fast into a warm and hazy dream. He thought a fire was heating his toes, and out of the shadows on the other side of the hearth he heard Bilbo's voice speaking. "I don't think much of your diary," he said. "Snowstorms on January the 12th, there was no need to come back to report that." "But I wanted rest and sleep, Bilbo," Frodo answered with an effort, when he found himself shaken, and he came back painfully to wakefulness. Boromir had lifted him off the ground out of a nest of snow. "This will be the death of the halflings, Gandalf," said Boromir. "It is useless to sit here until the snow goes over our heads. We must do something to save ourselves." "Give them this," said Gandalf, searching in his pack, and drawing out a leathern flask. "Just a mouthful each for all of us. It is very precious. It is Mirovor, the cordial of Imladris. Elrond gave it to me at our parting. Pass it around." As soon as Frodo had swallowed a little of the warm and fragrant liquor, he felt a new strength of heart, and the heavy drowsiness left his limbs. The others also revived and found fresh hope and vigor, but the snow did not relent. It whirled around them thicker than ever, and the wind blew louder. "What do you say to fire?" asked Boromir suddenly. The choice seems now between fire and death, Gandalf. Doubtless we shall be hidden from all unfriendly eyes when the snow has covered us, but that will not help us." "You can make a fire, if you can," answered Gandalf. "If there are any watchers that can endure the storm, then they can see us, fire or no." But though they had brought wood and kindlings by the advice of Boromir, it passed the skill of elf or even dwarf to strike a flame that would hold amid the swirling wind, or catch in the wet fuel. At last, reluctantly, Gandalf himself took a hand. Picking up a bundle, he held it aloft for a moment, and then with a word of command, "Now Rathaman!" He thrust the end of his staff into the midst of it. At once a great spout of green and blue flame sprang about, and the wood flared and sputtered. "If there are any to see, then I am at last revealed to them," he said. "I have written, 'Gandalf is here,' in signs that all can read from Rivendell to the mouths of the Anduin." But the company cared no longer for watchers or unfriendly eyes. Their hearts were rejoiced to see the light of the fire. The wood burned merrily under their feet. Oh, I skipped a line there. The wood burned merrily, and though all around it the snow hissed, and pools of slush crept under their feet, they warmed their hands gladly at the blaze. There they stood, stooping in a circle around the little dancing and blowing flames. A red light was on their tired and anxious faces. Behind them, the night was like a black wall. But the wood was burning fast, and the snow still fell. The fire burned low, and the last bundle was thrown on. "The night is getting old," said Aragorn. "The dawn is not far off." "If any dawn can pierce these clouds," said Gimli. Boromir stepped out of the circle and stared up at the blackness. "The snow is growing less," he said, "and the wind is quieter." Frodo gazed wearily at the flakes still falling out of the dark to be revealed white for a moment in the light of the dying fire. But for a long time he could see no sign of their slackening. Then, suddenly, as sleep was beginning to creep over him again, he was aware that the wind had indeed fallen, and the flakes were becoming larger and fewer. Very slowly a dim light began to grow. At last the snow stopped altogether. As the light grew stronger, it showed a silent, shrouded world. Below their refuge were white humps and domes, and shapeless deeps beneath which the path they had trodden was altogether lost. But the heights above were hidden in great clouds, still heavy, with the threat of snow. Gandalf saves the Fellowship with special wizard booze. Well, actually, special elf booze, if anything, because it was given to him by Elrond. And you know those elves, they really know how to party. They really know how to party. They've been perfecting it for thousands of years. They probably have vintages from, you'd go down into Elrond's cellar and he'd point to a bottle of wine and say, well, this is from the Second Age. It's pretty old, but here I have the good stuff, All right. So let's talk about this storm. Who caused it? This is the big thing. So in the film version, they specifically show Saruman causing this, and they specifically show the reason why Saruman would do such a thing, because he knew the Fellowship was there, and he wanted to drive them into Moria, because he knew, as well as did Gandalf, that there was a Balrog down there, and that he was trying to get them to go into Moria so that the Balrog would stop them. That doesn't make a lot of sense in the context of the book, because Saruman's motivations are to seize the ring for himself, and if it falls in Moria, or even worse scenario, if the Balrog gets its hands on it, he's not going to get it, obviously. But in the context of the movie, and giving a reason and showing a very cool scene of Saruman at Orthanc with his staff and the storm sort of flowing out of his staff towards Carithris, it made for good cinema. But in the book, they don't know there's a Balrog under there. The only person that has seen the Balrog and lived was Dain the Second Ironfoot. And that's the reason that he told Balin not to go to Moria. Balin didn't listen to him. He told all of the dwarves that Moria was pretty much forbidden, that they shouldn't go there. He didn't know that it was a Balrog. He didn't know what a Balrog was, but he called it something. He gave it the name Durin's Bane. He was the only one that saw Durin's Bane and lived. So there's no reason for Saruman to know about that, or for Gandalf to know about that. But who caused the storm? So there's like this argument about who caused the storm that has been going on in Tolkien scholars' circles pretty much since the books came out. And there's sort of like different theories, the most popular of which is that Sauron caused the storm, which was something that Boromir, sort of wondered about. Well, he said his arm would have grown very long if he could cause storms appear. And Gandalf says, well, it has, it has grown very long. And Gimli has the thought that the mountain itself, Caradhras, he said that, Caradhras the Cruel. And he believes that mountains are living things, that they all have their own wills, and that out of all these mountains that make up the chain that is the Misty Mountains, Caradhras is a jerk and is doing it just to spite them. And this is possible because as soon as they decide to turn back is when everything sort of kind of calms down, and Gimli even does this thing where he shakes his fist at the mountain like, all right, we're leaving, I would posit the theory that this storm was caused by Iluvatar, God himself, because they have to go through Moria. And you might think you know where I'm going with this, but you might be wrong. I'm not saying you're definitely wrong, but you might think that I'm saying that they have to go through Moria because Gandalf has to die and then return. And that's not the case. That's not where I was going. They have to go through Moria because Gollum is in Moria. If they don't go through Moria, Gollum doesn't follow them. Could it just be normal weather? That's also just a really strong theory, except for the fact that all the characters are standing around saying, this is weird. This is a weird thing for this time of year, this far south. Could it just be a freak storm? Absolutely. Absolutely. I'm of the opinion that Iluvatar caused the storm because he needed them to go through Moria because Gollum is there. If Gollum doesn't start following them, the ring doesn't get destroyed. And on some level, Gandalf sort of knew this. He had some foresight. He said, for good or ill, Gollum has a part to play before the end. Gollum destroyed the ring. Not on purpose, but he did. If he wasn't there, Sauron would have regained the ring because Frodo was putting it on, claiming it as his own. The Nazgul were already on their way. They would have arrived. They would have killed Sam. They would have killed Gollum if he was still around. They would have said, hey, they would have said to Frodo, this is something that Tolkien actually said. They would have bowed to him. They would have called him the Lord of the Rings. And they would have said, let's go. Let's go to your new tower. You're going to be our master. And they would have brought him to Sauron, and Sauron would have grabbed it right off of his hand. And then Frodo would have been slowly tortured to death over a period of years. And Sauron would win simply because nobody can stand against him. And the elves would be very weak because Galadriel would have to stop using her ring. Elrond would have to stop using his ring. And a lot of the places that were safe would become unsafe. Gollum's the key to the whole story. And he's in Moria right now. They have to go through Moria. So there are examples of divine intervention throughout the story. And this, I believe, is one of them. Of course, it is absolutely one of those things is 100% up for debate. Could it just be a storm? Yes. Could it be the mountain itself? Yes. Could it be Sauron? Unlikely, but yes. Could it be something else that we haven't even thought of? Yes. This is one of those mysteries. Well, God intervenes a lot of times. Just ask the people in Numenor. And here's the thing. When he did that, it wasn't just Numenor that got destroyed. There were a lot of, because he changed the shape of the world. He broke the world and reshaped it from a flat disc into a sphere. And there were new lands that came, and there were lands that were destroyed. One of them was Cuiviénen, and Numenor was lost forever. So he intervened with the dwarves too. I mentioned this a little bit a while ago. Aule made the dwarves, and this is one of the times where he actually came and he spoke to Ale and had a whole conversation with him, So, yeah, Iluvatar, Tolkien mentioned it in one of his letters, I believe letter 131. And he refers to Iluvatar and his role specifically in The Lord of the Rings, because this letter was before, obviously the Silmarillion hadn't been published. It wasn't published till after his death. This was about The Lord of the Rings. And there was a guy, I forget his Humphrey something, I forget his actual name. He was a owner of a Catholic bookstore. And he wrote a letter to Tolkien stating that he was uncomfortable with some of the theology in The Lord of the Rings. And Tolkien's response is very, very thoughtful and way more detailed than deserved. I mean, he never actually sent the letter. He wrote it and he never sent it. He said he felt it upon reflection. He came off as kind of self-serving and self-important and prideful, and he didn't want to actually send it. But it was published in his letters. I believe it was letter 131. And he said that The Lord of the Rings isn't theological in nature. It's literary and a bit didactic, which means that it's literature that is meant to teach a lesson, but not a specific lesson because it's not an allegory, but whatever lesson you wish to take from it and however you wish to interpret the thoughts of the author. But he referred to Iluvatar specifically in The Lord of the Rings as the character that is, and this is the exact wording, always present but never named. And this is really important because nobody really mentions Iluvatar in The Lord of the Rings. The closest is Faramir sort of makes an allusion to what lies beyond Elvenhome. But that's not really all that explicit, He's mentioned a lot in the Silmarillion and Unfinished Tales, even in the stuff that has to do with Numenor and their customs and such. But even the when Bilbo wrote his poem and he referred to the Elder King, he was not talking about Iluvatar. He was talking about Manwë in that sense. But Tolkien said he's always there. He's in every scene. He's just not named. And there are so many things. I've said that the conclusion of The Lord of the Rings is a string of miracles. It's just miracle after miracle after miracle. And it's something that had to happen in a very specific sense because any minor change would lead to a completely different conclusion. Because the ones that are sort of hands-off and doing this are the Valar. And they see what's going on and they say, all right, well, we'll send 5 wizards and 1 elf. And that's it. They sent a dream to Faramir. And what else? Not a whole lot else. So a lot of it has to rely on this, what seems to be random chance. Like, for example, Bilbo finding the ring. That's a miracle. And Tolkien had a word for when something happens that is extremely unlikely, but gives us great joy and relief. It's called a eucatastrophe. And he gives several examples of it in his essays about eucatastrophe. I highly recommend the book on fairy stories, where he talks about this stuff. It's really, really illuminating. Of course, one day we'll be reading it on here. But yeah, that's my theory. I'm not saying that it's the correct theory of what caused this storm, because Tolkien doesn't tell us. And if he was ever asked, I assume that his answer was, I don't know. What do you think? Because Tolkien believed in applicability. He wanted you to interpret the text the way that you will and take whatever lessons from it that you may. Whatever level you're reading it at, whether you're studying it or whether you're just reading it because you enjoy stories about hobbits and wizards or anything in between there. And that's all really important, that we all have our own interpretations. Obviously, there's stuff that is indelible because that's written. But this isn't written. There's a few hints here and there. and it's the opinions of the characters. We talked last time about who actually has physical possession of the Nine Rings. Was it Sauron, or do the Nazgul hold them? And I've come to realize that we don't really know, and that what we have is a difference of opinion between Gandalf and Galadriel. And even with Gandalf, he said two different things at two different times because something must have changed his mind. So, yeah, there's a lot of mysteries in Middle-earth and beyond, and I always enjoy theorizing about them because it is a form of what Tolkien referred to as subcreation, which is something that he was very fond of. Once again, highly recommend the book on fairy stories. Well, actually, it wasn't a book so much as it was an essay, and you can actually get it in a few different places. There is a collection that includes it called the Tolkien Reader, I believe it's called, and it has on fairy stories. It has Leaf by Neagle, which is a fantastic little story that is the only allegory Tolkien ever wrote, and it also has The Adventures of Tom Bombadil, which is fun. Oh, and Farmer Giles of Ham is in there. So all these little essays and little stories are collected. I highly recommend it. It's called The Tolkien Reader. Is my copy? Oh, here it is. Here it is. Look at that. This is old as heck, though. But that's my copy of the Tolkien Reader. When was this edition published? Does it say? Let's see if we can surmise when this was published. It's pretty old. 1976. I wasn't even born. So this is the 27th printing. But yeah, if you could find this, it's probably going to look different than this. It's the Tolkien Reader. So you get a lot of his thoughts on things. You get, let's see, there's a table of contents here. You get Tolkien's Magic Ring. You get The Homecoming of Bjorn Thoth to Bjorn Thelma's Son. Tree and Leaf, which includes Leaf by Neagle. Farmer Giles of Hand, The Adventures of Tom Bombadil. And the first part, Tolkien's Magic Ring, that contains On Fairy Stories, where he talks about all these different concepts that I've mentioned, subcreation and eucatastrophe and such. Let's continue. There's not much left, but I wanted to talk. Who is the publisher of this particular edition? I can tell you that very quickly. I just saw it too. Ballantine Fantasy published this one. Even has a price on the front, $1.95. That's what they asked for this in 1976. So yeah. I mean, it was first published in 1966. So Tolkien was still alive, but this particular edition is 1976, after he had passed. All right, let's finish. We don't have much left of The Ring Goes South, and I don't think we'll be able to do another chapter because the chapters have gotten long, and the next chapter is A Journey in the Dark, which is the bulk of the trip through Moria. And then we have the Bridge of Khazad-dûm. That's a short chapter. We have Lothlorien. That's a long chapter. The Mirror of Galadriel. That one's fairly moderate. Farewell to Lorien. The Great River. And the Breaking of the Fellowship is the final chapter of this particular volume. So we have a ways to go, but I think The Ring Goes South. This is another stream that is going to be just the one chapter, unfortunately. That happened with Council of Elrond, and it happened with Flight to the Forge, That's like $11 in today's money. Now, let's just briefly look. If I was to go on Amazon and look at what a softback Tolkien Reader would cost. Let's see. It's probably not going to be $11, right? Absolutely. I think that sometimes he wanted things to be left unexplained, like the nature of Tom Bombadil or what happened to the Entwives, because he wanted it to feel real. He wanted it to feel like something that could have really happened. And here's the thing. In real life, we don't know everything, right? So if we know absolutely everything about every aspect of it, it starts to feel like not so real. Okay, so let's see. The Tolkien Reader. Well, is that a hardcover? Oh, no, it's a mass market paperback that you can get for the low, low price of $8. That's pretty cool. Highly recommend that. If you want to spend a bit more money on a box set, they have them for $27. It's called the Tolkien Fantasy Tales box set, which includes several books. You get the Tolkien Reader, you get the Silmarillion, you get Unfinished Tales, and you get Sir Gawain and the Green Knight. So that's pretty great. That's up there for $27 right now. But if you haven't sampled the Tolkien Reader and you haven't read either Leaf by Nigel, which gives a fantastic view into how Tolkien's mind works, or specifically on fairy stories, where he just tells you a lot about his own writing process directly and his thoughts on things like subcreation and what makes fairy stories and eucatastrophe. Highly recommend it, So it looks like it's actually, Alice, it's gotten cheaper. So if that was like $11 in today's money, but they're selling it on Amazon for $8. Although of course I guess you have to pay shipping too, so that's the other side of the coin, right? I wonder what Tolkien would have thought of just being able to just order a book like that on a machine and have it delivered to you. I think he would have been kind of horrified. Horrified and delighted, right? All right, let's finish this chapter. Let's see. Oh, I had already read that part. As the light grew stronger, it showed us... Oh, I read that part. Okay, skip. Gimli looked up and shook his head. Carithris has not forgiven us, he said. He has more snow yet to fling at us if we go on. The sooner we go back and down, the better. Just realized I can't see Twitch chat. There we go. To this all agreed, but their retreat was now difficult. It might well prove impossible. Only a few paces from the ashes of their fire, the snow lay many feet deep, higher than the heads of the hobbits. In places it had been scooped and piled by the wind into great drifts against the cliff. If Gandalf would go before us with a bright flame, he might melt a path for you, said Legolas. The storm had troubled him little, and he alone of the company remained still light of heart. If elves could fly over mountains, they might fetch the sun to save us, answered Gandalf. But I must have something to work on. I cannot burn snow. Let's talk about this briefly. Very briefly. I believe in episode 101, it was either episode 100 or episode 101 of my Q&A show, I spoke specifically about that paragraph right there, about Legolas wondering, in a sort of joking way, if Gandalf could go before them burning the snow with fire, and Gandalf basically telling him, dude, shut up. Why don't you just go fly and get the sun for us then? And it was related to what I spoke about earlier about Tolkien's thoughts vis-a-vis Arthur C. Clarke's thoughts about technology and magic. And is there really magic in the world of Tolkien? And there is. And he says there's magic all around us. The technology is magic. It's just magic gone wrong. And I use this as an example of how he uses magic, which is something that he says himself in his foreword to the Silmarillion. He did not use consistently, but it's always a trait. Almost always. Sometimes it's the deceit of the enemy, which is what Galadriel refers to magic as. But hobbits seem magical to men. Elves seem magical to hobbits. Dwarves seem magical to some. And in this case, they're sort of misunderstanding what hey, I've seen you light things on fire. Why don't you just, go forward with a flame? And he's like, what am I burning? Gandalf is stating, yes, I can kindle fire, but it still has to. There's still some rules about it. There's still the laws of physics. I can't burn snow. There needs to be fuel for it. Sort of an interesting thought there that Tolkien was thinking of. Yes, he lights things on fire, but he doesn't throw fire. Even in The Hobbit, when he's throwing fireballs out of a tree down onto the wargs, he's lighting acorns on fire and turning them into fireballs and throwing them, with great accuracy. So there's rules to how it all works, is what I'm getting at. Even if he doesn't, always outline those rules. Eucatastrophe sounds similar to Deus Ex Machina. Well, it is a literary device like Deus Ex Machina. Deus Ex Machina is literally God from the machine, though, which actually I call it a literary device, and it became a literary device, but it was actually a stage device because they would have plays where the hero would be put into this sort of position where nothing can save him, and then he would be lifted by God out of danger, and they used a machine to lift him on the play. So that's where it came from, God from the machine. Eucatastrophe is any moment that brings us great joy and relief, and the destruction of the One Ring is a eucatastrophe, but it comes from a miraculous standpoint. None of the eucatastrophes that happen are just simple little things like, somebody finds a pile of money on the ground or something like that. There's always some sort of intervention, whether it's from the Valar or from Iluvatar himself or one of their agents, like Gandalf, for example. Well, said Boromir, when heads are at a loss, bodies must serve, as we say in my country. The strongest of us must seek a way. See! The wall is now snow-clad. Our path, as we came up, turned about that shoulder of rock down yonder. It was there that the snow first began to burden us. If we could reach that point, maybe it would prove easier beyond. It is no more than a furlong off, I guess. Then let us force a path thither, you and I, said Aragorn. Aragorn was the tallest of the company, but Boromir, little less in height, was broader and heavier in build. He led the way, and Aragorn followed him. Slowly they moved off, and were soon toiling heavily. In places the snow was breast high, and often Boromir seemed to be swimming or burrowing with his great arms rather than walking. Legolas watched them for a while, with a smile upon his lips, and then he turned to the others. The strongest must seek a way, say you? But I say, let a ploughman plough, but choose an otter for swimming, and for running light over grass and leaf, or over snow, an elf. With that he sprang forth nimbly, and then Frodo noticed, as if for the first time, though he had long known it, that the elf had no boots, but wore only light shoes, as he always did, and his feet made little imprint on the snow. Farewell, he said to Gandalf. I go to find the sun. Then, swift as a runner over firm sand, he shot away, and quickly overtaking the toiling men, with a wave of his hand he passed them, and sped into the distance, and vanished round the rocky turn. So I once watched on Twitch as Professor Corey Olsen spent about an hour talking about just that one part, and I'm not going to do that because he already did it, but it's interesting how what we have here is Gandalf saying, I can't burn snow, I need fuel, that it works a certain way, that there's rules to it. We have to observe the laws of physics, even when using magic. And then Legolas does that. He runs across the snow, not sinking into it. It's breast high, and he's running across the top of it. And Frodo is seeing that he's leaving very little imprint, almost no footprints at all. They kind of did it in the movie a little bit, where it wasn't as drastic as what we just read, but they showed it a little bit in the movie version. How does he do that? We never hear of elves doing that before. We never hear of elves doing that again. But I've said that there were certain choices that Tolkien made specifically about Legolas that were, he's strange and different because he's an elf. And like I said, it's kind of the first time that an elf has been a really important character. Elrond's just kind of, he flits in and out of the story. Thranduil was sort of an antagonist, even though he wasn't like the bad guy. He was, from Thorin's perspective, he was an antagonist, and he was only there as a minor character. Legolas is now this major character. He's a member of Frodo's party, and he does this weirdness. And I can't chalk it up to Frodo wrote it that way because Frodo's not Bilbo. It's not Frodo being weird about it and just writing something that didn't happen like sometimes Bilbo did. So in this, I could say that, yeah, how does he do that, right? What happened there? Elves have different rules. I will get to that in just a moment. Elves have different rules. They follow their own rules. And we see this just in the fact that for them, the world is still flat because they can sail to the Undying Lands. They go straight while the curvature of the earth goes down. If you had an elf ship and a man ship going side by side, eventually it would look like one's going off into the sky. It's the elf ship. So they're following a different set of rules. Now, here's the question about the burning snow. If I recall correctly, Melkor first makes a fauna made of burning ice and cold fire early in the Silmarillion. So does evil magic just ignore the laws of physics? So you're remembering it wrong. He was more like a walking volcano. He was stone and fire. That was his first fauna. Do I have the Silmarillion where I could reach it? I just wrote something about this not very long ago. Okay, I don't, but I have a digital copy that I could bring about. Actually, I think it was one of my thumbnails. What did Melkor look like? Let me bring that up. Actually. I'm going to go to Quora and just search my answers for this, though. Because I think that it was... unless you're reading like something like Lost Tales or something, but you said Silmarillion. Here we are. There we go. I found it. Yeah, Nick's Shadowhawk, which was a commenter, said anthropomorphic volcano, which I thought was rather cute. But where is the passage? I know I put it in there, or at least I quoted it. Yeah, a huge figure akin to a mountain, crowned with smoke and fire and with blazing eyes. That was the description from the Silmarillion. The reference to ice and cold is that he created bitter cold in Arda, and the reason that we have snow is because of him. Not that he was made out of snow or ice, but that he created the bitter cold. And Iluvatar says to Ulmo that it's actually a good thing because, and this was his lesson to the Valar and to the Ainur in general, that everything evil leads to something good. And says, yeah, he created this horrible bitter cold, but look at how beautiful snow crystals are, and look at how the clouds bring you, whose domain is water, and your Manwe, whose domain is the sky, closer together as if you were brothers. I know my friend Sid Kemp, it's one of his favorite passages in the Silmarillion. So he brings that one a lot. But yeah, it wasn't burning ice, or as you said, it was... I just had it. Crowned with smoke and fire with blazing eyes. He was more like a walking mountain, or as somebody in the comments section said, an anthropomorphic volcano, which is a really cool thought. All right. Oh, not that part. I skipped ahead there. The others waited, huddled together, watching until Boromir and Aragorn dwindled into black specks in the whiteness. At length they too passed from sight. The time dragged on, the clouds lowered, and now a few flakes of snow came curling down again. Billy the Mountain. You're funny, Moogle. An hour maybe went by, though it seemed far longer. Then at last they saw Legolas coming back. At the same time, Boromir and Aragorn reappeared round the bend far behind him and came labouring up the slope. "Well," cried Legolas as he ran up, "I have not brought the sun. She is walking in the blue fields of the south, and a little wreath of snow in this red-horn hillock troubles her not at all. But I have brought back a gleam of good hope to those who are doomed to go on feet. There is the greatest wind drift of all just beyond this turn, and there our strong men were almost buried. They despaired until I returned and told them that the drift was little wider than a wall, and on the other side the snow suddenly grows less, while further down it is no more than a wide white coverlet to cool the hobbit's toes." "Ah, it is as I said," growled Gimli. "It is no ordinary storm. It is the ill will of Carathrus. He does not love elves and dwarves, and that drift was laid to cut off our escape." "But happily your Carathrus has forgotten that you have men with you," said Boromir, who came up at that moment. "And doughty men too, if I may say it, though lesser men with spades might have served you better. Still we have thrust a lane through the drift, and for that, all here may be grateful who cannot run as light as elves." Just a brief note that Legolas refers to the sun using female pronouns, and this is actually really important because this is something that is very consistent with the elves and with men that take their culture from the elves, such as the Dunedain, that the sun is a lady and the moon is a guy. And I mentioned this when we talked about The Man in the Moon, the poem/song that Frodo sung when he was in Bree. And I talked about that the man in the moon would be Tilion the Maya, and the lady in the sun would be Arian the Maya. And Arian is an interesting character because in one of the versions of the origin of all this, she was one of the targets of Melkor or Morgoth. He wanted to marry her, and she told him no, and he tried to force the issue, and she burned him, and that accounted for the gray ashen skin that he had. But of course, that's Book of Lost Tales stuff, so it's may or may not be true. "But how are we to get down there, even if you've cut through the drift?" said Pippin, voicing the thought of all the hobbits. "Have hope," said Boromir. "I am weary, but I still have some strength left, and Aragorn too. We will bear the little folk. The others no doubt will make shift to tread the path behind us. Come, Master Peregrine, I shall begin with you." Oh, hey, Adby, thank you. We're wrapping up this chapter, and we're going to be ending soon. But thank you so much for being on the channel and for liking the Tolkien Q&As. He lifted up the hobbit. "Cling to my back, I shall need my arms," he said, and strode forward. Aragorn with Merry came behind. Pippin marvelled at his strength, seeing the passage that he had already forced with no other tool than his great limbs. Even now, burdened as he was widening the track for those who followed, thrusting the snow aside as he went. They came at length to the great drift. It was flung across the mountain path like a sheer and sudden wall, and its crest, sharp as if shaped with knives, reared up more than twice the height of Boromir. But through the middle a passage had been beaten, rising and falling like a bridge. On the far side Merry and Pippin were set down, and there they waited with Legolas for the rest of the company to arrive. After a while Boromir returned carrying Sam. Behind, in the narrow but now well-trodden track, came Gandalf, leading Bill, with Gimli perched among the baggage. Last came Aragorn, carrying Frodo. They passed through the lane, but hardly had Frodo touched the ground when a deep rumble there rolled down a fall of stones and slithering snow. The spray of it half blinded the company, as if they crouched against the cliff, and when the air cleared again they saw the path was blocked behind them. "Enough, enough!" cried Gimli. "We are departing as quickly as we may." And indeed, with that last stroke, the malice of the mountains seemed to be expended, as if Carathrus was satisfied that the invaders had been beaten off, and would not dare to return. The threat of snow lifted. The clouds began to break, and the light grew broader. As Legolas had reported, they found that the snow had become steadily more shallow as they went down, so that even the hobbits could trudge along. Soon they all stood once more on the flat shelf at the head of the steep slope, where they had felt the first flakes of snow the night before. Let me just catch up on chat here. Wait. I'm not familiar with those names, Chewie. Could you elaborate a bit on that? It sounds Japanese, but I'm unfamiliar. And what is that, Moogle? What is that emote that you used? This is like is that a cat? It looks like a cat. All right. The morning was now far advanced. From the high place they looked back westward over the lower lands. Far away in the tumble of country that lay at the foot of the mountains was the dell from which they had started to climb the pass. Frodo's legs ached. He was chilled to the bone and hungry, and his head was dizzy as he thought of the long and painful march downhill. Black specks swam before his eyes. He rubbed them, but the black specks remained. In the distance below him, but still high above the lower foothills, dark dots were circling in the air. "The birds again," said Aragorn, pointing down. "That cannot be helped now," said Gandalf. "Whether they are good or evil, or have nothing to do with us at all, we must go down at once. Not even on the knees of Carathrus will we wait for another nightfall." A cold wind flowed down behind them as they turned their backs on the Redhorn Gate and stumbled wearily down the slope. Carathrus had defeated them. Oh! Star Trek The Next Generation. How did I not get that? Yes. Oh, of course, Melkor. See, here's the thing. Melkor doesn't think that he's misusing his power. He thinks what he's doing is his by right because he's the mightiest of the Ainur. You know? He doesn't care about that because he doesn't think he's doing anything wrong. Or, well, in some cases. In some other cases, he knows he's doing it wrong and he's doing it on purpose because he wants to destroy creation. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Oh, I got you. Yeah, no. Oh, the Masks episode. That was a strange one. That was, season 7. I do remember that now. That was a very memorable episode. Well, that's the chapter, guys. Like I said, we don't really have time to do the next chapter because it's a journey in the dark, which is a pretty long chapter itself. That's the bulk of going through, well, getting up to and then going through Moria. So we're going to wrap it up here, guys. If you have any sort of questions for me or anything that you wanted to go over, whether regarding this chapter or anything to do with The Lord of the Rings or Tolkien in general, lay it on me now before we end. Now, you associate the moon with femininity, especially considering the menstrual cycle syncs with the moon. I can see that, and that's a popular thought. As a matter of fact, in Taoist believing, the moon is part of the yin, and the sun is the yang, and the yin is almost, not always, but almost always associated with being feminine, while the yang is masculine. Oh, I'll do that right now. Oh, okay, yes, all right. A video about Sid Barrett. I will definitely watch that at some point. Thank you for sending me that. For those of you who don't know, I do have other obsessions. Not everything is Tolkien, and Pink Floyd is one of them. So that's cool. Thank you for that. But yeah. But yeah, and actually, you do see some of the yin-yang Taoist stuff in Tolkien. I know some people will be like, "Oh, it's Catholic, it's Catholic." Like, yes, it is Catholic, but it is other things as well. And Tolkien was of a certain breed of people. Even C.S. Lewis was like this, even though he wasn't Catholic, but who believed that you have to look at the other belief systems and take lessons from them as well. And you see the yin and yang, not specifically called that, but you see it pop up a lot. Aryan and Tilion is actually a really good example of that. Evil people never really think they're evil. Melkor, I mean, he's sort of the guy that invented evil, right? But he's literally the devil in this case, right? He's the devil. And yes, he's evil for the sake of evil, but he's also not a person. Now, Sauron is a really interesting thing because he never thinks he's evil. He never thinks that he's the bad guy. There is a saying, the villain is the hero of his own story. And it's interesting, because Sauron and Melkor were so sort of playing each other because their interests they're not that similar, Sauron doesn't wish to destroy creation. He wishes to make it his version of what he believes to be orderly. He sees chaos everywhere. If I was to diagnose him, if I was a psychiatrist, which I am not, and if I had Sauron on my couch and he rambled to me about all this stuff, you know what I would say? He has obsessive compulsive personality disorder, OCPD. And that P is very important because there's OCD and there's OCPD. And it's all in the mindset. People who have obsessive compulsive disorder, OCD, they know that they're operating on sort of a different wavelength from everybody else, and they know that these obsessions are sort of detrimental, and they're trying to sort of like break away from it, and they're sort of thinking to themselves, what is wrong with me? Whereas people with OCPD are thinking, what is wrong with everybody else? Why am I the only one doing it right? And Sauron falls into that category quite a bit. You see it a lot in Tolkien's villains, actually. You see it a little bit with Saruman, and you see it a little bit with Smaug to a certain extent, but mostly you see it with Sauron, where he's just sort of like, this is the way to make things correct. Everybody else is sort of going about it the wrong way. I'm the only person who's sane. Jigalog energy, for anybody who's not familiar, Jigalog is an entity from the Elder Scrolls universe. He's a god of order. And he's sort of the other side of the personality, the god of Madash Sheogorath. And Jigalog, I think I said it when we were playing that game, when we were the Shivering Isles. I think I said that Jigalog in some ways has some similarities with Sauron, in that he thinks he's the one bringing order. And what's interesting though is that in the Shivering Isles, in the Elder Scrolls universe, the sort of conclusion was that we need both. We need order and we need madness. We need chaos and we need order. Whereas Sauron would never concede such a thing. His ultimate goal is the micromanaging of every single aspect of the universe. The lawful evil thing, that makes sense too. As Sauron, Melkor, definitely chaotic evil. Of course, if you said that to them, well, if you said that to Sauron, he'd probably, murder you for saying that he was evil. Just like he would, just even calling him Sauron would probably get you killed, because Sauron means the hated one. It's abhorred. The elves had a different name for him in the First Age that was more popular in Beleriand, which was Gorthar, which is something like terrible dread or something similar to that. Where would Saruman be in D&D terms? Now, Saruman is interesting because he starts off as lawful good, but he becomes lawful evil after a time. And it's because the lawful part is more important to him than anything else. Saruman is a similar sort of personality where he thinks that he's the only one that can save the world, although that's less to do with everybody else being so chaotic and more to the fact that he's got a hero complex. Saruman is the kind of guy who he can't deal with the fact that he's not in charge. If somebody doesn't listen to him, then they're a fool and they're wrong, and everything has to be his way. And when he doesn't get his way, he throws tantrums. There's a part in the Two Towers, and eventually, of course, we will be reading the Two Towers. But I'm gonna open it up right quick here, and I'm gonna give you a little preview. Let's see if I can find this quickly. There's the voice of Saruman as the chapter. And he's already waged war on Rohan. The Battle of Helm's Deep happened. He lost. He wasn't even there for it. And he is now in his tower on the balcony, and below him there's Gandalf and Gimli and Legolas and Theoden, and Merry and Pippin are not far off. And he says here, I want to read just selected bits. But, my lord of Rohan, am I to be called a murderer because valiant men have fallen in battle? If you go to war needlessly, for I did not desire it, then men will be slain. But if I am a murderer on that account, then all the house of Eorl is stained with murder, for they have fought many wars and assailed many who defied them. Yet with some they have afterwards made peace, none the worse for being politic. I say, Theoden king, shall we have peace and friendship, you and I? It is ours to command. So he's offering him peace, which is an interesting, sort of thing, because he lost, And he says, I didn't want this war, but he was literally the one that started it. He's trying to just gaslight Theoden into thinking that, he was the aggressor. It doesn't work out. Theoden tells him, you can go hang, pretty much literally. How does he react to this? Not getting his way. Gibbets and crows! Dotard, what is the house of Eorl but a thatched barn where brigands drink in the reek and their brats roll on the floor among the dogs? Too long have they escaped the gibbet themselves, but the noose comes, slow in the drawing, tight and hard in the end. Hang if you will. He freaks out. He throws a tantrum. He starts spitting insults. The dude is crazy, right? Oh, hey, Laurel. Yeah, we're just ending. I just finished the reading. I was just giving a brief little bit from the Two Towers because it came up in discussion. Saruman is the kind of guy who just... Let's just say that if you were playing a board game with him and he was losing, he would flip the board. And then he would explode the board. And then he would blame you. Look what you made me do. How dare you? So... Saruman, he's got this hero complex. He has to be the one in charge. He has to be the one that everybody listens to because he's really got an inferiority complex as well. And when we get to whataboutism is big with him. Yeah, absolutely. He does it to the hobbits. At the end of The Lord of the Rings. He goes into whataboutism, absolutely. But he's got the inferiority complex because he thinks he's in charge. He's the head wizard. He's the white. And Varda, the queen of the world, made a comment that he didn't like about Gandalf. And in his mind, he interpreted that comment where Gandalf was the third wizard chosen and Manwë told him that he must go, and Varda said, but not as the third. You can interpret that any way you wish, but Saruman's interpretation was that she thinks he's better than I am. He wasn't even a volunteer. The first two wizards to volunteer for this, well, they weren't yet wizards, but they would become wizards. The first two of the Maya that were going to volunteer were named Tarandor, also known as Kurno, who became Saruman the White, and another guy named Alatar. He became one of the blue wizards. He became Moranitar the Blue. And then it's like they step forward. They say, we'll go to Middle-earth. And then Manwë says, where's Aloran? Aloran has to go too. And Varda says, but not as the third. And this sticks with him the whole time. Aloran is Gandalf, for anybody who was wondering. And then, there's two more because Alatar says, can I bring a friend? And then Yavanna shows up with Radagast. He was called Iwendell at that point and says, I'd like this guy to go too. So that's how there became to be 5 of them. And Richard, you're right. he does think that Eru or Iluvatar approves of him, because what happens to him in the end, he even when you'd think he has to know, he's ruining the Shire out of spite. He's become almost like a mafia leader, and even then they won't kill him. They turn him out, and he goes too far with the abuse of the only guy he has left on his side, and that guy murders him. And what happens? His soul rises from his body, which withers to nothing very quickly. It becomes like a skeleton. That's Manwë doing that. And then his spirit looks to the west and then is blown away by a cold wind. He actually thought in his demented soul and his insane mind that he would be allowed to go to the west and be in Valinor again after everything he did. He really thought that was okay. Not just the stuff where he tried to join with Sauron because he thought I could make him better, but what he did in the Shire, which he even admitted was out of nothing more than spite. So yeah, Saruman's sick. Sometimes the smaller evils are the sicker ones, and it's interesting because Gandalf is there to fight the great evil. He's not there to fight the small evil. He's not there to deal with the Sarumans of the world. I mean, he was there to deal with Saruman in one very important way when he sent back his Gandalf the White. He gives him one last chance to repent. He's basically spit on, and he says, all right, well, you're no longer a wizard, so enjoy that. You're not on the council anymore, so enjoy that. And, hey, I'll see you around. I'll leave you in this tower. And, he weasels his way out because Treebeard wasn't ever going to be a jailer, but, what does he do? He's like, does he self-reflect at all? Does he say, where did I go wrong? No. He says, those hobbits, they're the ones that did this to me. I'll get them. He's petty. He's extremely petty. So, yeah. That's what happens with Saruman. Anyway, guys, it's been a blast doing this live for you guys and streaming on both YouTube and Twitch, and I enjoyed all the stuff from the chat. And I thank Chewy for joining the YouTube channel as a member, and I thank everybody else that came in and hit the like button. I saw the little hearts coming up. I saw everybody who chatted, everybody who sat there quietly and just listened. I thank everybody, basically, for coming here today. We are going to be ending. Let me come over to... Oh, no. This is the second time this has happened. Alice. Oh, we're being raided on the Twitch end here. Hold on. Scottish Maiden with a toast raid just brought in a whole bunch of people. And guess what? We're ending. We just finished. This is the second time this happened. You guys came in at the very end. Yes, I'm finishing. I'm so sorry that you're rating me as I finished. We just finished the chapter and a little bit of discussion. And I was just thanking everybody. Let me thank all the people that are coming in here. Aside from Scottish Maiden, we have Last Evro, of course. As usual, we have Lil Butts. And there was another name in there. Anchovy. Thank you for coming in. When will I do a live questions episode? We'll stick around for a little while longer just to answer questions and stuff. I've thought about that, and I think that, Well, you know what? We have to put it out there. Do you guys want me to do that? Obviously, Rico, you want me to do that. But, well, did you have anchovies on your pizza, Moogle? I kind of doubt it, but let me know if you did. What are we doing here? Let's see. Do you guys want me to do a live one day where I just answer questions? Or do you want me to... Is that what you want me to do? Answer questions from chat? Or is it that you want me to do something like do a normal Q&A video but do it live? And just kind of let you guys in on the on the making of one of those videos. Anchovies pizza is pretty good, but not the best, though. Still good. You know what the thing about anchovies and pizza here, and I'll tell you, is that it needs to be balanced out by something else. I would get it with onions and sometimes like sun-dried tomatoes, so you have like sort of sweetness and a little bit of acid to help balance it out. Sometimes sweet peppers. Maybe you do a poll on the community tab. Yeah, that's what I'm thinking. That we got to do something like that. Yeah. I mean, yeah, you know what? And for people who are sort of newer to the Tolkien side of my community and everything, like Scottish Maiden, for example, who, by the way, Scottish Maiden, you know, I met her on Twitch a few months ago, and she started by watching The Lord of the Rings, and then let's see, you bought The Hobbit, I know you read that, and I think that you're currently reading The Two Towers. You've been through Fellowship already, right? Let's actually, hold on, let me move scenes here. Let me come over here, because we're sort of ending here, and I have to fix this, hold on. And I'm sure you have lots of questions that you could ask, and you'd be kind of surprised at the answers a few times. You popped your The Lord of the Rings cherry in December of last year. That's right. Wait, actually, here's one thing we can do. Scottish Alice, have you heard me do the Gollum voice yet? I don't think you've heard me do it. You have heard me do it? Okay, all right. I'll do it anyway, but... What's dangerous, precious? Keep your nasty gypsies. Poor Smeagol. That's right, she subs to us. Very good subses. Not like nasty hobbitses. It seems antithetical to the regular show, but maybe. Well, you see, the regular show, when I'm doing it, Chewy, these are questions that come through Quora, and I have sort of time to think it out and to write a whole article and then to read it out for you guys. But I think it could be fun to just do a discussion thing where people sort of like just toss questions at me. And maybe it'll be more interesting to see me like maybe put a little bit more on the spot. It is, I wouldn't say antithetical, but it is maybe very, very different. And maybe we can do one as like an experiment just to see, will it work? How fun will it be? What are we going to do? But what we're going to do right now, is I'm going to let you guys know of schedule-wise what's going on, and then we're going to end the stream on YouTube. On Twitch, we'll be raiding somebody, so those of you who came in from Scottish Maiden stream, who I suppose must have been playing Fallout New Vegas, that's my assumption there, if you guys will stick around and just trade it on over to somebody else. Unfortunately, YouTube doesn't have raids, so there the stream just ends. But to let you guys know, for YouTube, the next live is going to be in 2 weeks on the 3rd, and I will have, that's going to be the Council of Tolkien. So I'll be over here. I'll have a different background, but I'll have Sid to, stage right and Matt to stage left, and we'll be doing our different topics and such and doing our podcast. And then the one after that, I'll let you guys know then, but it is most likely probably going to be on the 17th. We'll continue with the Fellowship of the Ring. It might be earlier, it might be later. It might be earlier, it definitely won't be later. I'll let you guys know because I've had a few Thursdays kind of free up recently, so I want to do more YouTube lives. So I might do those things more often, or maybe we'll do one like on the 10th where we do like questions or something different, right? Absolutely, Scottish Maiden. I think that, it wouldn't replace the main show because the main show is what made the channel, but I think that it would be something interesting to do every now and then. So we'll figure out something about some additional lives we can do on YouTube, but the next definite one is going to be in 2 weeks on the 3rd, where we're going to be doing that. For those of you on Twitch who follow the gaming content, tomorrow I'll be live, of course. I'll be doing tomorrow afternoon. We'll be playing Dragon Quest 3, and every day. And if you're on the Discord, you'll see the schedule and everything. As a matter of fact, can we get Discord invite links on both YouTube and Twitch from my moderators, if we can? Alice on YouTube and Moogle on Twitch. If you could get the the Discord invite links out there while I set up a raid for the Twitch side, and we'll end the live for the YouTube side. So let's see who's out there that we can raid on Twitch. Oh, wow, there's a lot of people on. I see my friend Jesse's playing though. He's live. We'll raid him. And for those of you who join me from Scottish Maiden stream, you'll like, if you like my stuff and you like her stuff, you'll probably like Jesse too. He's playing Zelda 2, which is one of his favorite games. So we'll raid him. He's called Armageddon Time. And he's quite the Tolkien fan himself. He enjoys my videos as well. So we'll do that. Okay, so that's going to go through, and once that goes through, we'll see you guys, and I'll be ending it. I thank you, everybody that came through on YouTube, that came through on Twitch as well. Thank you to Moogle and to Alice for being my moderators, and for everybody that came by here. It's not often I see nearly 50 people in the chat, so that's really, really amazing. So here we go.